31-year-old woman has been arrested on multiple charges after attacking a police officer. On the 16th of March, authorities responded to the intersection of Kings Highway and Gilbert Drive in Shreveport, Louisiana, regarding a suspicious person and located Andy Lynn Foshee. Andy allegedly became combative and caused injuries to an officer when she was approached. Multiple officers eventually took Andy into custody. Andy is charged with battery on a police officer, resisting with force or violence, interference with law enforcement investigation, use and possession of drug paraphernalia, and improper telephone communication. She is held at the Caddo Correctional Center on a $36,000 bond. The injured officer is expected to make a full recovery. 37-year-old Amber Patton of Paducah, Kentucky was arrested this week for the alleged ongoing abuse and strangulation of a 5-year-old boy. On the 13th of February, an investigation into the possible abuse of a child was launched after an elementary school staff member saw marks on the young child. The school's medical staff reportedly determined the marks were from abuse, and they noticed severe bruising, burst blood vessels, and other evidence of abuse. The boy was transported to the local hospital for treatment. McCracken County Sheriff detectives interviewed the parents and the children living in the household, conducted search warrants on the residence and electronic devices, as well as surveillance evidence, and concluded the boy suffered ongoing abuse and strangulation. The evidence was presented to a grand jury on the 17th of March, and Amber was indicted on charges of first-degree strangulation and first-degree criminal abuse of a child under 12. She was arrested on the 21st of March. The criminal abuse charge is punishable by 10 to 20 years, while the strangulation charge carries a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison. Authorities did not specify Amber's relationship to the boy. 29-year-old Darren Robb is behind bars after allegedly fatally shooting a woman. At around 4:20 a.m. on Tuesday the 21st of March, authorities responded to a home in the 100 block of North 10th Street in Suffolk, Virginia, on reports of domestic disturbance. When officers arrived at the residence, they found an unresponsive woman identified as 23-year-old Elijah Rivera with a gunshot wound. Medics treated her at the scene and took her to the local hospital where she was pronounced dead. Darren, a man who police believe shot Elijah, was still at the scene when officers arrived, and he was arrested. Police are calling the death of Elijah as a domestic-related homicide. Darren is charged with voluntary manslaughter and is held at the Western Tidewater Regional Jail without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. On the 16th of March, 25-year-old Thomas Rowley of Boise, Idaho, was found guilty of murdering his infant son. The incident occurred on Saturday the 20th of June 2020, when Thomas was left alone to care for his 4-month-old son Milo. While Milo was sitting in a chair, he became fussy and started crying, which agitated Thomas. Upset, Thomas knocked the chair over and the infant hit his head on the ground. He then picked Milo up and aggressively shook him for between 15 to 20 seconds before throwing him face first into the crib, causing a fatal brain bleed. Despite noticing his son was badly injured and wasn't breathing properly, he waited more than 4 hours before calling dispatch to get assistance for his son. By the time Milo arrived at the St. Luke's Medical Hospital, he was unresponsive and not breathing, and was declared dead at 8:14 p.m. Milo died from abusive head trauma and significant brain injuries and retinal hemorrhaging. The autopsy revealed Milo had fractures to his ribs and his arm that had already begun to heal, suggesting that he had previously been abused. Thomas admitted to detectives that he had shaken his son out of frustration in the past as well. He'll be sentenced on the 22nd of May and faces up to life in prison without parole. A 25-year-old Houston, Texas man has been charged with the murder of his 2-year-old daughter. DeAndre Flanagan picked up his 2-year-old daughter Zavae Flanagan from daycare at about 9:30 a.m. on Monday the 20th of March. At 10:15 a.m., they went to Walmart where the child's mother, Kirsten Watson, works. DeAndre and the girl's mother got into an argument at the store as they'd recently broken up before he hit her multiple times in the face, took her cell phone and left the store in a red Camaro with the child. Family members and law enforcement agencies were able to track DeAndre's movements using GPS on his cell phone. Deputies located DeAndre near Greens Road and Interstate 45, and he fled while deputies gave chase for 30 miles across Harris County. Kirsten used FaceTime to speak with DeAndre to try to get him to stop, but he refused. DeAndre crashed into other cars when the vehicle broke down in the field at St. Dunstan's Episcopal Church, near the intersection of Strubner Airline Road and Fernglade Drive. DeAndre continued FaceTime Kirsten and said, "This is what you made me do. All you care about is that man." Then, while Zavea was on his lap, he put his arm around her neck and squeezed tightly as she gasped for air. Kirsten told him, "No, stop, please. This is your daughter. She loves you." Ignoring her words, he hit her with a blunt object and choked her to death. SWAT members moved in on the vehicle and took DeAndre into custody. The unresponsive child was also removed from the vehicle, and emergency personnel attempted CPR on the girl. She was transported to the Memorial Hermann Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. DeAndre is charged with murder and is held at the Harris County Jail. During a court hearing on Wednesday the 22nd of March, his bond was set at $2 million. The Harris County District Attorney's Office said the murder charge could be upgraded to capital murder. 17-year-old Noleti Roberts has been arrested after she recorded herself on a video, placing a lit marijuana cigarette into the mouth of a 1-year-old girl. Noleti was babysitting the victim for a 16-year-old friend, who's the victim's mother. On Thursday the 23rd of March, deputies responded to a residence in Largo, Florida, on allegations of abuse. Deputies made contact with Noleti, who initially admitted to smoking marijuana near the victim. However, she denied placing the marijuana cigarette in the child's mouth. Through various investigative techniques, detectives were able to obtain the video, which shows Noleti placing the marijuana cigarette in the baby's mouth. The infant then inhales while the lit marijuana cigarette's in her mouth, and the embers begin to glow brighter. Noleti then takes the marijuana cigarette out of the mouth of the child and places it into her own mouth, and inhales, causing the embers to glow brighter. The next day, Noleti was interviewed again, and eventually confessed to watching the victim and placing the joint in the victim's mouth. Noleti refused to provide an explanation as to why she put the marijuana cigarette into the baby's mouth. Noleti was arrested and charged with 1 count of felony child abuse. She's been transported to the Pinellas Juvenile Assessment Center without incident. The investigation into the matter continues. A 45-year-old man faces multiple charges after he allegedly threw a woman into a campfire. At around 8:15 p.m. on Monday the 20th of March, authorities responded to a call about a suspicious person near Long Road in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and found a woman with burns on her upper body. The woman told police that she was attacked by a person she knew and was thrown into the campfire and held there. The victim was ultimately able to escape and find help. Paramedics transported her to a local hospital for treatment. Police identified Robert McWilliams as the suspect and located him in a wooded area where the alleged assault occurred, and he was arrested without incident. He was booked into custody on charges of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, intimidation of a witness, and assault with intent to kill. The motive of the attack and how the pair knew each other is unclear. Fairhaven police said they did not know the woman's current condition. On Monday, 33-year-old Thomas Lopez was sentenced to 18 years in prison after pleading guilty to multiple charges in the beating death of a woman last year. On the 24th of February 2022, authorities responded to the Roosevelt General Hospital in Portales, New Mexico. There they met with a victim who had been kidnapped, beaten, battered, and struck with the golf club multiple times. The victim, identified as 26-year-old Sabrina Cauldron, succumbed to injuries 4 days later. The victim arrived at the hospital with Thomas. While he was there, Sabrina told hospital staff that she fell down the stairs, but after Thomas left, she said that Thomas hit her with golf clubs, bit her on the ear and punched her. She suffered bruising all over her body and had dry blood near her ears. Sabrina told deputies that she and Thomas had been in an on-and-off relationship for the past year, and that he abused her for the past month. She said he forced her to stay in a room in his house along Roosevelt Road 6, and she wasn't allowed to leave or go to the bathroom. She said things got worse when she attempted to call her father when Thomas was able to stop her, because he had installed audio and visual surveillance equipment in the vents of the home. He then beat her up, pulled her by the hair and used a cord of a lamp to strangle her while yelling, "Shut up, you did this to yourself." He then forced her into the barn on the property where he tied her to a chair and punched her in the head multiple times, before hitting her several times full force with a golf club. On Monday the 27th of March, Thomas pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including murder, kidnapping, resisting, evading, or obstructing an officer. His 18-year sentence includes a 4-year habitual offender enhancement. 24-year-old Christopher Charles Amore is behind bars after allegedly killing a man because he was tired of dealing with him. At around 4:30 p.m. on Sunday the 26th of March, authorities responded to a home in Casa Grande Circle in Spring Hill, Florida for a welfare check. A neighbor called police thinking something may have been wrong, as there was no activity at the home since the day before. When deputies arrived, they made their way through the premises to the master bedroom. Upon entering the room, they observed obvious signs of a struggle, as well as the lifeless body of a man. While searching other rooms in the home, deputies found Christopher in a second-floor bedroom. Initially, Christopher did not attempt to communicate with deputies. Fearing he was also dead, deputies approached to check on him. When he began to talk, he was taken into custody without incident. While questioned, he allegedly told detectives that he killed the person because he was tired of dealing with him. Authorities have not disclosed details of the relationship between the two men, the victim's name, or how he was killed. Christopher is charged with second-degree murder and is held at the Hernando County Jail without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. A 39-year-old woman was arrested after allegedly ripping out a chunk of hair out of a child's head during an altercation in Fairmont, West Virginia. On Wednesday the 29th of March, authorities responded to a residence in Fairmont on reports of a domestic disturbance. When officers arrived, they made contact with Tabitha Gibson, who told officers she had consumed 4 bootleggers. She blew .227 on a breathalyzer test administered at the home. Before officers arrived at the premises, they learnt that Tabitha was in a verbal argument with a juvenile, which led to her ripping a chunk of hair out of the child's head. Another child was also in the residence, and Tabitha was the only adult looking after them at the time. Tabitha was charged with 2 counts of child neglect, creating risk of injury. She's been held at the North Central Regional Jail on a $10,012 bond. On Friday the 24th of March, a 31-year-old woman who bit off the earlobe of a security guard during a department store theft was sentenced to 70 months in prison after pleading guilty to second-degree assault and first-degree attempted robbery. On the 22nd of July, loss prevention guards confronted Ashley Ruth Clark as she exited the Nordstrom Washington Square Mall in Tigard, Oregon, when she was caught trying to steal $800 worth of merchandise. As the guards attempted to recover the stolen items, Ashley physically resisted arrest and began shouting obscenities at them. During the struggle, Ashley bit one of the guards' earlobes, tearing off at least half an inch of flesh. The victim was taken to hospital, where medical professionals were unable to reattach the earlobe. Authorities said that when Tiger police arrested Ashley, she provided a false name and date of birth to the officers, who realized that she had 2 outstanding warrants for her arrests. She'll serve a 70-month sentence at the Oregon Department of Corrections, followed by 3 years of post-prison supervision after her release. On Friday the 24th of March, a 22-year-old mother was ordered held without bond in the death of a 19-month-old son. Jamie Hanyon is charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony endangering the life and health of a child resulting in death. At 2:33 p.m. on the 17th of October, authorities responded to a mobile home in the 800 block of Victory Lane in Justice, Illinois on a report of a deceased toddler. Police said Jamie left her son Nathan in a relative's care, who then found the baby boy and called police. Officers found the unresponsive baby in his crib with blue lips and was cold to touch. He was severely malnourished, covered in his own vomit and feces, and rigor mortis was setting in. First responders pronounced the toddler dead at the scene. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office said the boy died of nutritional neglect, and his death was ruled a homicide. At the time of his death, Nathan weighed just 9.5 pounds. The average weight of a boy of his age is around 25 pounds. According to authorities, Jamie knowingly did not feed or provide nutrition to Nathan for numerous days. The Cook County Sheriff's Office tried to arrest Jamie on the 26th of February, but found she was out visiting family in Tennessee at the time. An arrest warrant was issued 2 days later, and on the 7th of March, she was arrested by the FBI Fugitive Task Force in Tennessee and was extradited back to Cook County on the 23rd of March. Investigators questioned Jamie, who told them that she heard her son screaming in the other room and did nothing because she didn't feel like getting up. Jamie reportedly told investigators that she was a bad mother and admitted to keeping Nathan in his crib for most of his life. Jamie's next court appearance is scheduled for the 20th of April. 30-year-old Michelle Campbell and 31-year-old Paul Webber are behind bars after their son was found locked inside a dog cage and their two daughters were left outside in the rain. At 12:52 p.m. on Thursday the 23rd of March, authorities responded to a home at 4215 Glenview Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on reports of screaming, and found two girls aged 3 and 5, partially dressed, crying outside in the cold rain. Officers picked them up and gained entry into the residence. Once inside, they found a naked 6-year-old boy locked inside a small dog cage with a pillow and a blanket that was secured with a zip tie. It's unclear how long the boy had been kept there for. 5 children reportedly lived at the house, including 2 who were at school. The 3 children were taken to the St. Christopher's Hospital for evaluation. An 80-year-old woman in a wheelchair and a man in his 40s were also inside the home when police arrived. However, there was no word on whether they faced any charges. They're believed to be the grandmother and uncle of the children. The boy and the uncle reportedly have intellectual disabilities. Michelle arrived while the police were there. She was taken to the Special Victims Unit for questioning. Police said that officers have been called to the home numerous times before. Neighbour Hector Perez said there's been drama at the home for years. Cops have been coming here on and off. Nothing has ever been done, he said. Tom McNee, who lives a few doors from the house, said the Department of Human Services has been to the home before. On Friday the 24th of March, Philadelphia police announced that Michelle and Paul were arrested and have been charged with endangering the welfare of a child and recklessly endangering a person. The investigation into the matter continues. 40-year-old Robert Casteres behind bars after allegedly stabbing his wife to death during Bible study at his sister's home early this week. At around 9 p.m. on Tuesday the 21st of March, authorities responded to the residence along Maryland Avenue East, near Cypress North Street in St. Paul, Minnesota on report of a stabbing. When officers arrived, they found 41-year-old Karina Woodhull with severe injuries to her torso, chest and arms, and Robert was being held down on the floor by several people. Karina was treated at the scene and was taken to the Regions Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Robert's sister told police that she hosts Bible studies at the home on Tuesday nights with family members. She said Robert and Karina arrived and sat together on a couch. Robert held Karina's hand and kissed her. At one point, Robert whispered something into Karina's ear, in which she shook her head, before he pulled out a knife and stabbed her repeatedly. Robert was then tackled by family members and disarmed. A person present for the Bible study said they provided aid to Karina after she was stabbed, and she said, "Don't let me die." Another witness said they believed Robert would have stabbed others had he not been disarmed. The Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office has since ruled Karina's death a homicide due to multiple sharp force injuries. Robert briefly spoke with investigators, telling them that he and Karina had been legally married for a couple of years and lived together until a month ago. He wouldn't say why they no longer lived together and requested his attorney, so the interview ended. Robert's brother told police that Robert and Karina had been having marital issues. Karina is survived by 5 children. Robert's charged with second-degree murder, and his bail's been set at $5 million. If convicted, he faces up to 40 years in prison. Robert has previous felony convictions for assault. He used a hammer to attack a woman he had a relationship with and stabbed a roommate. The investigation into the matter continues. A 38-year-old woman has been sentenced to 30 years in prison after she pleaded guilty to charges relating to her 8-year-old son's severe malnourishment and neglect. Akemi Cox entered the plea on Wednesday the 22nd of March, almost 2 years after she was arrested on 3 counts of neglect and 2 counts of abuse. In February of 2021, neighbors at the Coffee Creek Mobile Home Park in Edmond, Oklahoma, called the Department of Human Services after they noticed a boy rummaging through a dumpster one night looking for food. The boy was taken to the hospital, and Edmond police became involved. A caseworker noticed that the boy's stomach was distended, yet he was extremely skinny, and his skin was sagging. The caseworker took the boy to the Children's Hospital, where a doctor labelled it a shocking and heinous case of child neglect. The boy wore toddler-sized clothing that's usually for children around 2 to 3 years old, and weighed 30 pounds, and was only about 3 feet tall. Akemi reportedly kept her son on a sugar-free diet, which only allowed him to eat crackers, and she refused to let an officer buy the boy food when he was in the hospital. She reportedly even took some of the food away at the Children's Hospital, saying too much sugar. The boy had only gained 6 pounds in 7 years. He was placed into foster care and is reportedly doing well. Just prior to her arrest on Wednesday the 26th of March 2021, Akemi also lost custody to 5 other children. 24-year-old Thomas Maxwell is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting 20-year-old DeJuan Gadsden at a Citgo gas station in Nashville, Tennessee on Thursday night. At just after 10 p.m. on the 23rd of March, officers responded to a hold-up alarm in the business in the 3900 block of Clarksville Pike. Upon arrival, they found Thomas armed with 2 handguns, leaving the gas station, and he was taken into custody. Inside the store, they found DeJuan dead on the floor with multiple gunshot wounds. While questioned, Thomas had claimed that DeJuan had robbed and severely assaulted him in February, and that he shot DeJuan in self-defense. He said that when he entered the Citgo store, he and DeJuan made eye contact, and DeJuan appeared to reach for something. Thomas said that he then reached for his firearm and shot DeJuan. Metro Police said that a subsequent review of the surveillance video contradicted Thomas's version of the shooting. Authorities said that it showed DeJuan parking his vehicle and entering the store before Thomas arrived a short time later. Thomas is seen walking up to the front door and watching DeJuan from outside the building. As DeJuan approached the front counter, Thomas entered the store with a firearm in hand and immediately opened fire. DeJuan never looked in Thomas's direction and did not appear to reach for anything. After DeJuan fell to the floor, Thomas leaned over him and continued shooting him. No one else was injured during the ordeal. Thomas is charged with criminal homicide and is held at the Metro Jail. The investigation into the matter continues. A 20-year-old man is behind bars after his 3-month-old son spent days on life support and died from abuse-related injuries. On the night of Saturday, the 18th of March, Malachite Tate Sr. took his son Malachite Tate Jr. to the Cherokee Medical Center after allegedly finding the boy unresponsive in his apartment in Gaffney, South Carolina. Medical officials had to resuscitate him before airlifting him to the Greensville Children's Hospital for additional treatment and care. The boy was put on life support that day. The child passed away shortly after 3 p.m. on Wednesday the 22nd of March. Malachi Sr. said his son fell, but the Cherokee County coroner Dennis Fowler disagreed and said the boy's wounds are no doubt from abuse. He said that the child had multiple areas of injuries on his body that were not consistent with a fall. He said it appears the child may have been tortured, and it makes me sick to my stomach that a helpless infant has suffered and lost his life at the hands of someone who had a total disregard for a human. We must send a message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Malachi was arrested and charged with abuse and inflicting great bodily injury upon a child. He's held at the Cherokee County Jail without bond. Gaffney police said they're in the process of upgrading the charges against Malachi. On Wednesday the 22nd of March, 37-year-old Veronica Youngblood was found guilty of murdering her 2 daughters in 2018 by giving them sleeping gummies and fatally shooting them. Veronica pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to killing 15-year-old Sharon Castro and 5-year-old Brooklyn Youngblood, but she was nonetheless convicted of 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of felony use of a firearm. On the night of Sunday the 5th of August 2018, Veronica provided her daughters with sleeping gummies and shot them in their apartment in the 1500 block of Lincoln Circle in McLean, Virginia, because voices in her head told her to do it. Brooklyn died from a gunshot wound to the head, and Sharon was shot in the back and chest, and Veronica fled the apartment. Sharon survived the shooting long enough to call 911, and at around 10:15 p.m. authorities arrived at the scene. She told the officers that her mother came into the room and told her that she was going to take her to see God, and then shot her. She was rushed to the hospital where she later died. Veronica tried calling her ex-husband Ron Youngblood and left a voicemail telling him that she loathed him and admitted to killing the 2 girls. Brooklyn was supposed to move to Missouri with her father. Veronica's eldest daughter was from a previous relationship. Within an hour, police apprehended Veronica in Loudoun County after an acquaintance of hers contacted authorities saying she had knocked on her front door. At a trial, Veronica testified that she was physically and sexually abused as a child, then abandoned by her parents. She said she became a sex worker, and that's how she met her ex-husband. Following the conviction, Veronica started yelling at prosecutors and had to be restrained. Prosecutors are seeking 2 life sentences. A couple are dead following a murder-suicide in Cape Coral, Florida on Friday morning. The incident occurred at around 8 a.m. on the 24th of March inside a home located at 726 Southwest 12th Street. John Stern reportedly shot his fiancée, 28-year-old Kimberly Burdick, before turning the gun on himself, all while their 3-year-old toddler was inside the house with them. Kimberly's mother, Mulaney Burdick, said that the police told her that John had shot her daughter 3 times with a rifle. He shot her once in the chest and twice in the arm-shoulder area, before he shot himself in the head. She was found laying half covered up on the bed. John's father found the couple dead after John didn't show up for work that morning, and the toddler was found inside. Mulaney said thank God he didn't shoot him too. She believes that drugs could have been a factor in her daughter's death. Her addiction began when she started dating John. They met on the internet, and that was the end of it. Nightmares started, she said. She quit coming around. When you did see her, she had sores all over her, higher than a kite. Couldn't talk to her, she said. Mulaney said that Kimberly was her only daughter, and when she reflected on memories of her, she said, "Very beautiful, big blue eyes, long blonde hair. You couldn't ask for a happier, better kid," she said. In addition to the son Kimberly had with John, she leaves behind 2 other children. 21-year-old Kira Burnett Johnson was arrested after striking a Walmart employee with a curtain rod and stealing another employee's phone. At around 5 p.m. on Wednesday the 22nd of March, authorities responded to Walmart at 465 Bridgeport Avenue in Shelton, Connecticut on a report of a fight. Responding officers determined that Kira, who was accompanied by 2 young girls, attempted to leave the store with a cart full of unpaid goods. When loss prevention staff members confronted Kira, she began to yell and spit at them. She struck one of the employees with a curtain rod she attempted to steal and stole the phone of another employee after he dropped the device during the altercation. Kira and the 2 girls were then seen by witnesses fleeing in a Jeep Cherokee. Authorities subsequently located the Jeep along Bridgeport Avenue. While attempting a traffic stop, the car sped away on Route 8. The Walmart employee was able to track his stolen phone to a residential address in Bridgeport. Later that day, officers went to the premises to investigate and located Kira, the 2 girls and the Jeep Cherokee. Kira was arrested and charged with 3rd-degree robbery, engaging police in pursuit, and 2 counts of injury to a child. She was also charged with operating a motor vehicle without a license, after the officers discovered that she was not licensed to drive. She was released on a $5,000 bond. The Walmart employee struck by the curtain rod suffered minor injuries as a result of the incident. 33-year-old Brittany Cooper-Donner is behind bars and charged with manslaughter after a 2-year-old died after ingesting fentanyl. On the 14th of February, authorities responded to a residence at Lot 22 Green Tree Court in Ashland, Kentucky, after someone at the premises called 911 on reports of an unresponsive child. Paramedics rushed the toddler to the King's Daughters Medical Center, where the juvenile was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. A search warrant was executed at the home, and police found evidence of fentanyl in the room where the child was found. On Thursday the 23rd of March, Brittany was arrested and charged with 1st-degree manslaughter, 1st-degree wanton endangerment, and 1st-degree possession of a controlled substance. She remains held at the Boyd County Detention Center on a $100,000 cash-only bond. A woman is behind bars after fatally stabbing a 17-year-old girl in northeast Columbus, Ohio. At around 11:45 p.m. on Sunday the 26th of March, authorities responded to the outside of the 161 carry-out business, located at 5691 Emporium Square, and found 17-year-old Harley Culbertson suffering from at least 1 stab wound. Harley was transported to the local hospital in a critical condition, where she was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. 18-year-old Brianna Berrezzini was identified by witnesses and through video surveillance has been involved in an argument that began inside the carry-out's convenience store and escalated into a fight outside in the parking lot. Authorities found Brianna at her home at Westerville, where she reportedly admitted to having a knife and swinging it at Harley during the fight. She's been charged with murder and is held at the Franklin County Jail. Authorities are investigating a shooting that left 1 person dead and another injured in the Benton Park West neighborhood of St. Louis, Missouri on Monday morning. At just before 9 a.m. on the 27th of March, authorities responded to an alley behind a home at 3023 Iowa Avenue on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a man and a woman inside a car with multiple gunshot wounds. The woman, identified as 26-year-old Jalia Hunter, was pronounced dead at the scene, while another victim, an 18-year-old man was rushed to a local hospital in a critical condition. No arrests have been made to date, and it's unclear what events led up to the shooting. The investigation into the matter continues. 32-year-old Inderdeep Singh Gosals behind bars and is accused of fatally stabbing 37-year-old Paul Stanley Smith outside a Starbucks over the weekend. The incident occurred at around 5:30 p.m. on the 26th of March at the intersection of West Pender and Granville Streets in Vancouver, Canada. Paul and his 3-year-old daughter Erica were outside the coffee shop, while his fiancée Ashley Amali went inside to get the drinks. While they were waiting, a stranger later identified as Inderdeep stood next to Erica who was in the stroller and started vaping. Paul asked the man to stop smoking near his daughter. Ashley came out and Inderdeep reportedly told her, "You better grab your kid." A confrontation between the two men ensued and Paul was stabbed. Witnesses caught the incident on video. Paul was seen clutching his stomach and staggering around for a moment before collapsing into a pool of blood. At around 5:40 p.m, an officer patrolling the area was flagged down by bystanders. First responders spent several minutes trying to save Paul's life, but he was rushed to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. Inderdeep remained at the scene, and he was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Kathy Smith, Paul's mother, said she was in despair watching the video, as no one around or in the coffee shop came to her son's rescue. She said, "I was incredibly surprised that no one from inside the Starbucks called for help. No one outside called for help. It wasn't until basically he was in dire straits that somebody flagged down an officer on the sidewalk. What kind of world are we living in when you take your family to Starbucks in the middle of the afternoon and you're attacked and killed, with many people standing around videotaping and watching?" The investigation into the matter continues. 31-year-old Jake Harris is behind bars after allegedly fatally shooting his girlfriend and living with her decomposing body for days. At 10:45 a.m. on Saturday the 25th of March, authorities responded to a home at 4212 Altadena Avenue in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, when a man visiting the property called 911 after finding a dead person inside the residence. When officers arrived, they tried to make contact with Jake, who had barricaded himself inside the home and refused to come out. Oklahoma City Tactical Unit also responded to the scene and took Jake into custody after a 5-hour standoff. After entering to the residence, police found Jake's girlfriend, 40-year-old Amanda Miller's decomposing body on the garage floor that appeared to have been there for several days. Jake told police that the couple had an argument on the 22nd of March and he grabbed a shotgun. He said Amanda grabbed the barrel and the gun went off, striking her on the side. He told police he didn't call an ambulance because she was already dead. He said he initially moved the body to the bedroom and then to the garage the following day. After moving the body, he allegedly tried to clean the crime scene. Amanda is survived by 4 daughters and 10 grandchildren. Amanda's children said that she tried to leave Jake in the past and the relationship had a history of domestic violence. Jake is charged with first-degree murder and he's been held at the Oklahoma County Detention Center without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. 81-year-old Reginald McLaren is behind bars after allegedly killing his 70-year-old wife and 35-year-old daughter because his family was about to lose their apartment in Englewood, Colorado. At 6:03 p.m. on Saturday the 25th of March, authorities received a call from Reginald, who said that his wife and daughter had been murdered. He said that he believed he knew the suspect, and the suspect had used a hammer. Officers responded to 901 Englewood Parkway, where they found the front door was locked. When they knocked, Reginald opened the door. He was asked to exit the premises, while officers swept the apartment for potential suspects. When they searched the apartment, they saw blood dripping from the top of a kitchen trash can, and what appeared to be human hair coming out of the top. The officers also saw 2 large rollaway black trash cans on the sides in the living room. The officers found one body in each of those trash cans. The cans appeared to be new, as they did not have any scuffing on the wheels. A large axe was found in a closet, and a handsaw near the trash cans, and there was a lot of blood in the apartment. Reginald told the authorities he killed his wife Bethany McLaren and their daughter Ruth McLaren because he was worried about money, and he wanted to prevent them from being homeless. He said he was employed at the hospital shared services, but was recently terminated. He said his family was supposed to leave their apartment that day, but they had no place to live due to finances. Reginald said he worked with the homeless in the past, and said he was familiar with the challenges that come with it. He said he used an axe to hit his wife and daughter in the head while they were on the couch, and then hit them again 2 more times while they were unconscious, until he knew they were dead. He said the bodies wouldn't fit into the trash cans, so he used a saw to remove their arms and legs. The cans were too heavy, and he could not move them, he said. Reginald reportedly planned the attack 10 days prior, and purchased an axe, trash cans, and a handsaw, which he kept in the apartment. He told authorities that he didn't regret the attack, because he knows they're in a better place. Reginald was arrested that night, and is charged with first-degree murder. He's held at the Arapahoe County Jail without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. A woman is accused of leaving a newborn son to die in a field near a trailer park where she lived. On Tuesday, 38-year-old Santos Cruz was charged with neglecting a child resulting in death and moving, hiding and burying a child. At 11 a.m. on the 4th of March, authorities responded to Twin Oaks Trailer Park in Whitewater, Wisconsin, on a report of a dead newborn baby. Officers found the baby in a black garbage bag inside a box. Witnesses told investigators that they found the box in the field near the trailer park. They said that when they opened the box, they removed a black garbage bag and emptied the contents. When they saw there was a baby inside wrapped in a shirt, they called 911. During the investigation, detectives identified Santos as the child's mother. During an interview, Santos said that on the 27th of January, she was having a lot of pain in her stomach and laid in the bathtub. When she gave birth to a baby boy, she said he was not breathing, moving or crying. After continuously checking the baby, she placed him and the placenta in a plastic bag. She said she kept the bag open in case the baby started to breathe, before hiding the baby under the sink cabinet. Later, however, Santos changed her story and said that she knew the baby was alive when he was first born, but was possibly choking. She told police that the baby started turning purple, but she did not call 911 for help. Santos, who has other children, had not told her family about the pregnancy. She did not tell her children because she did not want to lose contact with them, because she was pregnant with a different man than their father. Later, when her other children were asleep, she took the baby from inside the cabinet, wrapped him in a pink sweatshirt and put the bag inside a cardboard box on her bed, and cried all night. Early the next morning, she drove to a field near the trailer park and left the baby behind. She said she checked on the box every day and cried. Santos is held at the Jefferson County Jail on a $10,000 cash bond. If convicted, she faces up to 37 years in prison. A woman is behind bars for allegedly fatally shooting a car dealership employee during a heated argument after he refused to refund money for a car she leased. At around 9 a.m. on Monday the 20th of March, 23-year-old Jakira Anderson went to MSI Auto Sales at 3012 Parmenter Street in Middleton, Wisconsin, to dispute a transaction involving a vehicle. She spoke with employee 34-year-old Korsu Samba, and she argued with him for hours. At around 1:30 p.m, Korsu directed Jakira to leave the building and placed his hand on her back to guide her out the door. Jakira stopped at the exit door, turned to face Korsu and pulled out a gun and fired a bullet into his chest. After being shot, Korsu stumbled backwards and fell into the parking lot. Jakira then stood over him for a brief moment before getting into a car and leaving. Jakira had been on a call with 911 when the call disconnected. Upon the dispatcher calling her back, Jakira told the dispatcher that a man put his hands on her, but said she left the scene and was headed home, but she did not report that she shot Korsu. Witnesses contacted 911 on reports of a man shot, and paramedics rushed Korsu to the hospital in a critical condition, but died shortly thereafter. Doctors said he took a direct hit to the right lung and heart. Police located Jakira outside her mother's home 2 hours later on the far west side of Madison, and she was arrested. In an interview with police, Jakira said she pulled out a gun because she felt threatened by Korsu, but she could not explain to officers anything threatening that he said to her. She told police she was trying to scare him back or something, and then said, "Didn't think I was going to hit him. I wasn't even aiming or nothing." Jakira is charged with first-degree intentional homicide and is held at the Dane County Jail on a $1 million bond. 35-year-old Heath Marshall Dunning of El Dorado, Illinois, was found guilty this week for stabbing a man in the heart during an argument as the two men drove down a rural road. At 8:39 p.m. on the 15th of April 2021, Franklin County Sheriff's deputies responded to a road in West Frankfort and found 50-year-old Dennis Martin suffering from a stab wound. He was declared dead at the scene, and deputies arrested Heath on suspicion of murder. According to authorities, on the night of the stabbing, Heath was driving Dennis's van along State Route 149, and the two men fought over Heath's directions of travel. Dennis reportedly tried to take the keys out of the ignition, when in retaliation Heath grabbed a knife with his right hand and swung towards Dennis's chest, plunging the blade between his ribs and deep into his heart. Heath pulled into a driveway and called 911. A Franklin County Sheriff's Office responded within minutes, but the damage was immediately fatal, and Dennis was deceased before paramedics arrived to assist. On Thursday the 23rd of March, Heath was convicted of first-degree murder and fell in possession of a weapon. Heath has previously been convicted of aggravated battery, criminal damage to property and burglary. He'll be sentenced at a later date. A 36-year-old man is behind bars for allegedly attacking his girlfriend after she confronted him about sexually assaulting her 11-year-old daughter. In the early morning hours of the 10th of March, Baldwin County deputies responded to David Scott Perez's home in Robertsdale, Alabama, after a concerned neighbor heard fighting at the home. When deputies arrived at the scene, they witnessed a child running from the house screaming for help. David and his girlfriend got into a physical altercation after she questioned him over allegations that he sexually abused her daughter. David allegedly punched and hit her in the face multiple times with a broomstick, causing broken facial bones. He then strangled her until she blacked out. David and the woman were taken to local hospitals for treatment for injuries sustained during the fight. The woman told investigators that she tried to call 911, but David took her phone from her and continued to attack her. On the 17th of March, David was arrested on charges of domestic violence assault, domestic violence strangulation, and interference with the domestic violence emergency call. Deputies then spoke with the 11-year-old girl, who told investigators that David had sexual intercourse and other sexual contact with her. Following that interview, David was additionally charged with first-degree rape and sexual abuse with a child under 12 years of age. David's been held at the Baldwin County Jail on a $40,500 bond. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for the 30th of March. The mother and grandfather of a newborn found dead in a ditch in Norwalk, Iowa have been charged with first-degree murder. 25-year-old Megan Stored told police that the child was born at home at 407 Center Street in Norfolk, Iowa on the 24th of February. She told authorities that she then left him in the box. She didn't touch him or provide any care for him, as the baby cried on and off for the next 2 days. She said that she and her father, 64-year-old Rodney Stored, then placed him in a trash bag while he was still alive and discarded the child in the street. Rodney confessed to helping his daughter dispose of the bag in a ditch a few miles from their home. Initially, they both told police that the baby died on the way to the hospital after he was born. Megan said they buried him in a cemetery in Cumming, Iowa, but authorities found no evidence of a fresh grave at the cemetery. Police began an investigation on the 8th of March after being contacted with concerns for the safety of a child. Megan's co-workers contacted police after becoming suspicious when they noticed that she wasn't pregnant anymore and there was no baby, and things they got told just didn't make any sense. The next day, with the help of cadaver dogs, authorities found a baby's body along the road in the 5300 block of Delaware Street in Norwalk, Iowa. On the 13th of March, a witness showed authorities a text message with Megan, in which a witness asked, "Was the baby alive when you left him?" and she replied, "A little." Later that day, Megan and Rodney were arrested. Norwalk Police Chief Greg Staples said, "It's just a tragic set of circumstances on a number of levels. That baby didn't have a choice to decide his own fate, and now there's people in jail because of it." The results of an autopsy are pending, and the investigation is ongoing. It's unclear what led the mother and her father to dispose of the child. The home is now boarded up with signs saying it's unsafe to occupy. A neighbour, Chris Henschel, said that the baby's death made him sick. "We knew she was pregnant. We didn't know that she delivered it. We had no idea," he said. "Honestly, I was pretty appalled. Not really surprised though, just because of the vibe they gave. They were kinda weird," he added. Rodney and Megan are each held at the Wayne County Jail on a $1 million bond. If convicted, they face life in prison. Iowa has a law that allows someone to leave an infant for up to 3 months at a hospital or a healthcare facility without facing legal action. 34-year-old Craig Williams is behind bars and is accused of fatally stabbing his parents Brenda and Billy Williams, both in their 60s, inside their home on Tuesday. At around 7:30 a.m. on the 14th of March, authorities responded to a residence at Tipton Drive in Hopewell, New Jersey for a welfare check. A relative of the victims said that numerous calls went unanswered over the weekend and Billy hadn't shown up for work on Monday morning. When police arrived at the home, Craig answered the door with bloodstains on his clothes. He told the officers that his parents were not home and initially refused to let them inside. After some persistence from the officers, Craig finally let them in. He led them to his parents' bedroom, where they found Brenda and Billy deceased with multiple stab wounds. He said that his parents had been inside for 2 days. Several knives and an axe were seized by police as evidence. Craig was identified as a suspect and he was arrested. He was charged with 2 counts of murder, desecration of human remains, 2 counts of weapons possession charges, obstruction, hindering apprehension, and tampering with evidence. Craig remains held at the Cumberland County Jail. Investigators said they responded to 20 prior incidents at the home in the last 2 years, including domestic violence, harassment, assaults and verbal arguments. All incidents involved Craig, who was arrested numerous times for assaulting his parents. 23-year-old Connor McStudis is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting 34-year-old Richard William Durkich during a confrontation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on Monday. And just before 5 p.m. on the 13th of March, authorities responded to multiple reports of shots fired at the intersection of Banksville Road and Crane Avenue. When police arrived, they found Richard inside a minivan with a gunshot wound to his chest. He was taken to a local hospital in a critical condition, but died shortly thereafter. During the investigation, detectives reviewed CCTV camera footage which showed Connor in a silver pickup truck stopping at an intersection and Richard in a minivan stopping behind him. Richard approached the truck and got into an altercation with Connor before he was seen wincing backward, turning around to run back to his van when Connor shot him. Detectives arrested Connor and charged him with criminal homicide. He's been held at the Allegheny County Jail as the investigation into the matter continues. Authorities in Massachusetts are investigating the fatal shooting of a 29-year-old man earlier this week. And just after 10:45 p.m. on Monday the 13th of April, the New Bedford Police Department received a shop spotter alert for shots being fired near the corner of Dartmouth Street and Dunbar Street. When officers arrived, they found an unresponsive man who had been shot multiple times, sitting in the driver's seat of a black Dodge Charger parked on the south side of Dunbar Street. The victim was rushed to the St. Luke's Hospital. He was pronounced dead a few hours later. The man was identified as Derek Pires of Fall River. He was the sole occupant in the vehicle. Derek leaves behind his fiancée, 2 girls aged 8 and 9, and a 2-year-old boy. Authorities have released no further information about the case, as the matter continues to be investigated. Authorities in Nashville, Tennessee are investigating a shooting that left a man dead early Monday morning. At around 4 a.m. on the 13th of March, police responded to a home at 1020 Lishi Avenue on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived at the residence, they went upstairs and found 47-year-old Therese Patterson unresponsive from a gunshot wound to his chest. He was rushed to the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where he later died. Investigators said that Therese, who lived in the home with others, was spending time in an upstairs room with a visiting acquaintance when a gunshot was heard. The man visiting Therese then ran out the front door before police arrived. Homicide detectives are looking for a suspect as the investigation continues. Officials said they are pursuing strong leads as they learn more about Therese's visitor. A man is wanted in connection to the fatal shooting of 11-year-old girl early this week. The incident occurred at around 1 a.m. on Tuesday the 14th of March at the Northside Hills apartment complex in Griffin, Georgia, when the girl was struck by a bullet intended for someone else. The bullet went through the apartment bedroom window as the girl slept inside, killing her instantly. Sheriff Darrell Dix of the Spalding County Sheriff's Office said they have identified 22-year-old Keonta Jahorn Parks as a suspect. He hasn't been arrested and is wanted for felony murder, 4 counts of possession of a firearm during a commission of a crime, 3 counts of aggravated assault, 14 counts of violating the Georgia Criminal Street Gang Act, cruelty to children, and domestic terrorism. Darrell said that Keonta is considered extremely armed and dangerous, adding that he is a monster. He said that the shooting appears to be gang-related and that Keonta was firing a high amount of rounds. He was shooting at another person and pulled into the parking lot from about 100 yards away with a rifle, and he was just spraying bullets, he said. The investigation into the matter continues. In Athens, Texas, mother and grandmother have been arrested and charged in connection with the death of a young child who was killed over the weekend. At 6:41 a.m. on Monday the 13th of March, Mary Johnson contacted authorities and reported that she believed her daughter, 42-year-old Monica Figueroa, had hurt her son. Officers responded to the home on the 300 block of Mitchell Street, where they found the child deceased and partially covered with a blanket. Investigators determined that the child, a 4-year-old boy named Grayson Hurt, had been killed the day before. Mary said she heard the child screaming before she witnessed the daughter on top of a rolled-up blanket, cutting it with a wooden handle knife, and then the screaming stopped. Monica reportedly threatened her mother and ordered her to leave the home, and she did. When Mary returned to the home the next day, the child was dead, and she called 911. While questioned, Monica allegedly confessed to killing her son. She was arrested and charged with capital murder and is held at the Henderson County Jail on a $2 million bond. Mary was also arrested and charged with endangering a child. Her bond has been set at $250,000. Grayson was the only child in the home, and Monica's other children were not in her custody. The motive in the killing is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. 43-year-old Heather Wallace of Lowell, Michigan, has been arrested and charged with sexually assaulting a 3-year-old granddaughter in November. The investigation began last month after the Lowell police began with a tip from the Hillsdale Police Department. Heather originally contacted Hillsdale Police about a man from Coldwater she met on an online dating app. She said that the man, 52-year-old Daniel Ramsing, asked her to take pictures of her granddaughter and sexually assault her, but she told officers that she did not comply with their request. Detective Aubrey Culver from the Lowell Police Department said, "I was looking into her first as a witness for information stemming from their case, and it sort of took a left turn from there," she said. Heather told investigators that she accidentally deleted Facebook communication with Daniel. A search warrant was then approved and then submitted to Meta for Heather's social media information. While detectives waited for the information from Meta, a detective with the Hillsdale Police Department told Aubrey that they had reviewed information from Heather's phone dump and that they had located 2 videos and 1 photo of a child of a sexually abusive nature. Detectives were able to confirm the identity of the child in the videos and photo to be Heather's granddaughter. When confronted with the evidence, Heather then admitted to taking the videos and photo and sending them to Daniel during video chats with a man in a Hunt Street residence. Lowell police said it happened while Heather was watching her granddaughter in November. Aubrey said that she did not have custody of her. She was more of a babysitter for when the mother was working. The child has been removed from Heather's care and returned to her mother. On Tuesday the 14th of March, Heather was charged with criminal sexual conduct, aggravated child sexually abusive activity, aggravated possession of child sexually abusive materials, and using a computer to commit a crime. She faces a minimum of 20 years in prison if convicted. She's held at the Kent County Jail on a $500,000 bond. Daniel was also arrested and charged in Hillsdale County for criminal sexual assault involving his own granddaughters. He was arrested back in January and remains in jail. A 24-year-old Indiana man was arrested this week, several months after his newborn daughter was found with bite marks all over her body. On the 3rd of November, Gavin Rogers went to the Witham Hospital in Lebanon with his 2-week-old baby and the child's mother for the infant's checkup. Medical staff became concerned after seeing bite-shaped bruises on her knee, wrists, her forearms, stomach, leg and shoulder. Gavin told hospital staff that the bruises must have come when he open-kissed or play-bit his daughter and must have nibbled her too hard. Gavin lives with his parents in Greencastle, but stayed with the baby and her mother in Whitestown since the baby's birth. The child reportedly spent time in the neonatal ICU following her birth, and one nurse reportedly said she was not comfortable sending this baby home to the care of the father. Nurses at Witham said they heard Gavin call the baby ungrateful little bitch and said she was evil. Witham officials transferred the girl to Riley Hospital for Children in Indianapolis and alerted the Indiana Department of Child Services. A Raleigh doctor reported the baby had several areas of bruising, including some with teeth marks. Whitestown Police Detective Joseph Turney said that the newborn's injuries could have only been inflicted while using excessive force, which would have caused severe pain to the girl. On Tuesday, the 14th of March, Gavin was arrested and charged with neglect of a dependent resulting in bodily injury and domestic battery. He's held at the Boone County Jail without bail. 32-year-old Paddy Patrick Purcell of Pennsylvania is behind bars after he's accused of entering a Ben Salem home, climbing into a bed with a sleeping 9-year-old girl and assaulting her. At around 1 a.m. on Sunday the 13th of March, a girl woke up to find a stranger laying in a bed beside her in just his underwear. A girl ran out of the room to get her father, who found Paddy sitting on his daughter's bed wrapped in a blanket. He confronted the man and managed to flee the home before police arrived. The girl told investigators that the man touched her inappropriately. The girl's father described Paddy as a white male with red hair and an Irish accent, and said he did not know the man. The suspect left his jacket and keys behind with his name on them. Investigators believe that the man entered the home through an unlocked door. A short time later, police found Paddy in his apartment nearby, and he was arrested. He is charged with burglary, criminal trespass, and indecent assault of a child under 13 years old. He's been held at the Bucks County Correctional Facility on a $1 million bond. A 20-year-old man is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting a 22-year-old man at a surf shop in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And just before 8 p.m. on Tuesday the 14th of March, authorities responded to the Surfstyle store at 315 South Gulfview Boulevard on reports of shots fired on a shop's second floor. When officers arrived, they found 22-year-old Rodney Sweeney on the floor in a critical condition with a gunshot wound to his neck. He was rushed to the local hospital where he later died. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage and identified Jonathan Stanley as a suspect. He was arrested the following night and charged with second-degree murder charges. He remains held at the Pinellas County Jail on a $750,000 bond. Authorities said that the shooting appears to have started as a fight and escalated when gunshots were fired. Police said that the victim and the suspect did not necessarily appear to know each other, but appeared to be looking for a fight. Surveillance footage showed Rodney striking a man inside the store when Jonathan pulled out a gun and shot Rodney. Jonathan then hid the gun under a clothes rack in the store and ran away. 19-year-old Zayon Mizuchi was also arrested after helping Jonathan evade authorities by staying at his house following the shooting. He was charged with accessory after the fact and marijuana possession on Wednesday, but released the next day on a $5,150 bond. The investigation into the matter continues. 43-year-old Damien Holler is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting 59-year-old Diane Stroll. At 10:27 p.m. on the 15th of March, authorities responded to 172 Shannon Drive in Long Pond, Pennsylvania on reports of a person shot. When officers arrived, they met with Damien at the door, who told them he initially thought that someone was breaking into the home where he lived. Once inside the residence, officers found Diane laying on the floor in a pool of blood, with a gunshot wound to her upper chest and was not breathing. They performed CPR on her, but she was pronounced dead when medics arrived. Investigators found a gun nearby. Damien's fiancée, Christine Fretz, and 4 juveniles believed to be his children were found in the basement of the home uninjured. Christine told investigators that the victim was her mother. Investigators said that Damien was drunk and waving the gun around and threatening occupants, which led to an argument between him and Diane. The argument turned physical and the gun discharged, killing Diane. Damien was arrested and charged with 1 count of criminal homicide, 1 count of possession of a weapon, 2 counts of reckless endangerment, and 1 count of simple assault. He's been denied bond and remains held at the Monroe County Correctional Facility. 37-year-old Crystal Alexandra Pinelski is behind bars after 3 children were found living in a home alongside a deceased elderly woman and more than a dozen dead animals. On the night of Thursday the 16th of March, Horry County Police responded to a home at 8002 Highway 814 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for a death investigation. Upon arrival, officers found a naked deceased elderly woman lying in feces on the front porch. Authorities have not disclosed the deceased victim's name, and an autopsy is pending next week. Officers then covered the body with a blanket before searching the home. Inside the residence, they found it to be in deplorable condition. Crystal, who's the owner of the home, had 3 children in her custody living in unsanitary conditions. Officers noticed that the hallway to the children's rooms were completely covered in garbage and feces, and the entire residence was infested with cockroaches. They found the kitchen infested with bugs, and the refrigerator was blocked with animal cages and trash. The bathroom was cluttered with trash, making it inaccessible. Police found 16 dead animals inside the home. Crystal was arrested and charged with 3 counts of unlawful conduct towards a child, abuse or neglect with great bodily harm of a vulnerable adult, 15 counts of ill treatment of animals including torture, accumulation of overgrowth vegetation, and vehicles required to be registered and licensed. She's held at the Ori County Jail without bail. 39-year-old Anthony Clark is behind bars in the alleged beating death of his 41-year-old wife Latonia Joy Clark. At 10:10 a.m. on Saturday the 11th of March, authorities responded to an apartment in the 9100 block of South Las Vegas Boulevard in Las Vegas, Nevada to assist medical personnel in a suspicious death of a woman with cuts, burns and bruises on her body. Upon arrival, officers were met by Anthony and Latonia's 2 children inside the residence. They then located Latonia's deceased body in her bedroom. Anthony told police that Latonia was out all day and came home all bloody at around 7 p.m. the night before. He said he went to check up on his wife during the night and she was in bed. He said that when he went to check up on her in the morning, he found her on the ground and not moving. One of Latonia's daughters said that when her mother came home Friday night, she heard fighting and loud stomping noises in her mother's bedroom. She said after hearing the noises, she saw Anthony leave the bedroom and close the door behind him. The other daughter told detectives that Anthony and Latonia were heard arguing early that morning, along with taser sounds coming from the bedroom. Investigators found Latonia's body in a defensive posture, with parts of her head shaved with several cuts and bruises. Police suspected that the cuts were made by nail clippers and found nail clippers on the kitchen counter. The bruises and damage to her face appeared as though she had been beaten. Police found clumps of hair, along with blood-stained sweatpants inside a trash bag. They also found a bedsheet and washcloth covered in blood nearby. Their children later told police that Anthony beat their mother every night. Latonia and Anthony had been married for 15 years. The medical examiner's office determined that Latonia's cause of death was from multiple blunt force injuries, and her death was ruled a homicide. Anthony told officers that he believed he was being set up through his electronic devices. He was arrested and charged with open murder, and he's held at the Clark County Detention Center without bail. Anthony also faces 2 additional charges of child abuse or neglect. 25-year-old Trinell Brown was arrested Saturday afternoon for fatally shooting his parents. At around 1:30 p.m. on the 18th of March, deputies responded to a report of shots fired at a residence along McFarland Road in Spanish Fort, Alabama. Upon arrival, deputies located 2 victims inside a home with gunshot wounds. They were pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, detectives identified Trinell Brown as a suspect. They believe he went to his parents' house to confront them about an ongoing family dispute. During the argument, Trinell fatally shot both of his parents. After the shooting, Trinell exited the premises and told witnesses that he killed his parents. Deputies responded quickly after being notified about the homicides and took Trinell into custody. He's held at the Baldwin County Jail and is being held without bond on 2 counts of murder. No further information has been released at this time. A woman was found fatally shot in a car in Dallas, Texas on Thursday. At around 5:20 p.m. on the 16th of March, officers responded to a report of shots fired in the 4200 block of Tacoma Street. Authorities determined that 30-year-old Devontae Traylor, the driver of the Dodge Charger, shot Regine in the 1500 block of Duncanville Road, about 8 miles away. They did not say how they identified him as a suspect or provide any additional information about what led to the shooting. Regine is survived by her 2 children. Devontae was arrested and charged with murder, and he's held at the Dallas County Jail on a $1.25 million bond. He's also held on a misdemeanor charge of family violence assault from 2019, in which he's accused of hitting a woman. A 38-year-old man is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting his wife in the presence of his 4 children, who are all under 9. At 11:23 a.m. on the 14th of March, authorities responded to an apartment complex in the 2000 block of West Fry Road in Chandler, Arizona on report of a domestic violence-related shooting. When officers arrived, they found a male suspect, identified as Mohammed Al-Kurdi, outside the apartment with his 4 children. Officers searched the residence and found Muhammad's wife shot to death. Investigators said that after Muhammad shot his wife, he put her body inside a bedroom closet. A neighbour initially called 911 after Muhammad allegedly admitted to shooting his wife, and one of the children also told the neighbour that his father fatally shot his mother. The victim's name has not been released at this time, as notification to family members in other countries is still being conducted. Muhammad was arrested and charged with first-degree homicide. Child endangerment charges are possible as well. Muhammad has a criminal history of domestic violence and allegedly threatened a woman with a knife. The investigation into the matter continues. 63-year-old Norris Lowles is behind bars after allegedly fatally beating his 55-year-old fiancée with a floor lamp. At 7:56 p.m. on Wednesday the 15th of March, authorities responded to a home on reports of a domestic disturbance on the 5,000 block of Hornsby Drive in Memphis, Tennessee. When officers arrived outside, they heard yelling and screaming coming from both the backyard and inside the home. Officers knocked on the front door several times and could hear a woman yelling, "Help, he's got a gun, kick the door in." An officer attempted to kick the front door in, but saw a large dog through the window and stopped. Officers continued to knock and saw Norris through the window, walking up the hallway. Police say the victim continued screaming, "He has a gun." This was the last time officers reported hearing the victim. Officers continued to knock on the front door, and Norris yelled, "What?" before officers announced themselves at the front door. Eventually Norris opened the door wearing a white blood-stained t-shirt. When officers ordered him to get on the ground, Norris replied, "You get on the ground." Norris then reached for a gun in his waistband, and officers tased him. Norris was taken into custody and was transported to Regional 1 Health to treat non-life-threatening injuries. While searching the property, officers located a woman in the backyard laying on the ground, suffering from multiple lacerations to her head. They also found a floor lamp with a heavy base covered in blood at the scene. The woman, whose name remains anonymous, was transported to the hospital in a critical condition, where she succumbed to her injuries at 8:53 p.m. Norris is charged with second-degree murder and assault on a first responder. He's held at the Shelby County Jail on a $50,000 bond. Norris has an extensive criminal history, including an attempted murder charge from 1979. 23-year-old Xavier Daquan Hatcher is accused of fatally shooting McDonald's employee, 19-year-old Daquantavius Proctor in Augusta, Georgia early Sunday morning. At around 1:20 a.m. on the 19th of March, Richmond County deputies were called to Smith Drive on reports of a person shot. When deputies arrived, they found a young man identified as Daquantavius in a critical condition suffering from a gunshot wound. First responders tried performing life-saving measures on him. However, he succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene at 2:30 a.m. During the investigation, authorities learned that the shooting happened about a mile away. Investigators said that Daquantavius was sitting in the car with a female in the McDonald's parking lot where he worked at 3132 Peach Orchard Road. Xavier shot at the vehicle Daquantavius was in, striking him. Xavier was captured on CCTV at the restaurant, as well as seen in a grey SUV. Later that day, Xavier was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, murder, possession of a firearm or a knife during a crime, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The motive behind the shooting is unclear. In 2017, Xavier was convicted for gang-related activities and is paroled in May of 2022. The investigation into the matter continues. A man is behind bars for allegedly fatally shooting a man last week and robbing a woman earlier this month in Marshalltown, Iowa. At 4:03 p.m. on Friday the 17th of March, police responded to a residence at 618 West Boone Street after receiving a 911 call saying that someone had been injured and was not breathing. When officers arrived at the home, they found 27-year-old Isaiah Montel Forrest unresponsive from a gunshot wound. He was declared dead at the scene. During the investigation, authorities identified 20-year-old Amarian Demir Issam as the suspect. Police said that the two men were acquaintances, but did not elaborate on how they knew each other. Police have not said whether the armed robbery incident and Isaiah's death are related. That same day, while investigating the murder, a 23-year-old woman told police that she was robbed at gunpoint in Marshalltown on Monday the 6th of March and identified Amarian as the suspect. The robbery occurred in the area of Center Street and Grant Street. On Saturday, Amarian was arrested and charged with first-degree armed robbery. An autopsy was completed, and determined that Desir's death to be a homicide. On Sunday, Omarion was additionally charged with first-degree murder. He's held at the Marshall County Jail without bond. The victim Desire also has a criminal history. He's been involved in several armed robberies in 2017 and served 5 years in prison and was released in September last year. 41-year-old Aurelian Rick Framuso was accused of fatally stabbing a tenant who was renting his late mother's home in Clearwater, Florida. On the night of the 16th of March, Aurelian went to the backyard of his deceased mother's home at 1240 Pine Avenue and began damaging the exterior air conditioning unit, kicking it, and banging on it with a brick. Investigators said that 61-year-old Scott Christie went outside to investigate the commotion when Aurelian entered the residence through an open door. During an ensuing struggle inside the premises between the men, Scott was stabbed. He was transported to the Morton Plain Hospital, where he died. Police said that the Christie family rents the home, and the property's been in probate, and there's an ongoing civil litigation between the Christie family and the children of the owner. Aurelian was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He's held at the Pinellas County Jail without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. A man is behind bars for allegedly killing a 66-year-old man early this month. Authorities said that on Sunday the 12th of March, 56-year-old Jerry Crutcher fired an arrow at Charlie Williams in the victim's apartment at the Sparish Willows apartment complex, located at 7515 Gaya Springs Road in Little Rock, Arkansas. At around 4:40 a.m., police found Charlie deceased with an arrow sticking out of his chest. During the investigation, police found a second victim with an arrow wound. On Friday the 17th of March, Jerry was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and second-degree battery. He's held at the Pulaski County Jail on a $500,000 cash bond. The motive in the attacks is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. Authorities in Rio Oso, California are investigating after 2 bodies were discovered in Sutter County. At 4:07 p.m. on Friday the 17th of February, deputies responded to the area of Kempton Road, near Brewer Road, after a local farmer discovered the bodies of a man and a woman. When deputies arrived at the scene, they found a deceased woman inside a blue Ford Explorer and the lifeless body of a man outside on the dirt road approximately 50 yards away, both with gunshot wounds. The victims have been identified as Vicky Care Villefone and Derek James Engelman, both 40 years old. It's unclear what led up to the shooting, and no suspect information has been released. Sutter County Sheriff Brandon Barnes said that this is a tragic event and will work diligently to obtain answers for our community, he said. Detectives in Tulsa, Oklahoma are investigating a homicide that occurred early Wednesday morning. At around 2:15 a.m. on the 15th of March, authorities responded to reports of a young woman shot at the Cobblestone Apartments complex at 7643 East 51st Street. When officers arrived, they learned someone had fired multiple shots through a second-floor bedroom window. The victim, 19-year-old Braylee Owens, was lying in bed with a boyfriend when one of the bullets hit her in the head. Paramedics rushed Braylee to the local hospital, where she later died. Her boyfriend was not injured in the shooting. Detectives are currently interviewing witnesses and collecting evidence. The motive in the shooting is unclear, and no arrests have been made to date, as investigation into the matter continues. On Friday the 17th of March, a pre-sentence hearing at the Melbourne Supreme Court in Australia heard details of how 40-year-old Adam Brown stabbed his wife to death. The former Deakin University digital media lecturer pleaded guilty to murdering 35-year-old Chen Cheng in September last year. Chen was born in China and moved to Melbourne to study Masters of Construction in 2015, and the couple met the following year. They married in 2017 and had a child together in 2020. On the night of the 30th of April, the couple were arguing about future kindergarten arrangements for the child when the fight escalated and moved through various rooms of their Croydon North townhouse at 26 Patrick Avenue. Adam said that Chen spat in his face and hit him around his ears. He said he tried to restrain her and pushed her away. They both then walked into the kitchen and armed themselves with knives. Chen was stabbed in the neck in the kitchen, losing a large amount of blood. Adam told police his wife bit him on the arm. The wife moved to the backyard, where they both ended up on the ground struggling over a single knife. During the struggle, Adam realised that Chen had sustained serious injuries. She tried escaping out the back gate, but it was locked. Neighbours heard cries and screams coming from the home, and Adam saying stop, get down and shut up. Concerned neighbours knocked on the front door at around 10 p.m. When there was no answer, they heard Chen scream, "Help me, he's trying to kill me." They banged on the garage and Adam let them inside, where they found Chen laying unresponsive in the backyard in a pool of blood with multiple stab wounds. Adam told neighbours they had stabbed each other. A nurse in the neighbourhood tried performing CPR for about 15 minutes before police and paramedics arrived. At 10:40 p.m, Chen was pronounced dead. The autopsy revealed that Chen died from 3 deep stab wounds to her chest and neck. Adam only received minor cuts to his hands, bruising on his chest and arms and a bite mark on his forearm. A forensic examination of the crime scene found extensive bloodstains throughout the home, furniture, back deck and grass. During the court hearing, Adam's barrister said his client was deeply sorry and accepted that he'll serve a lengthy jail term for the murder. Adam was remanded in custody and will be sentenced at a later date. 2 men are behind bars and are accused of killing a 22-year-old man in Chicago's Douglas Park neighborhood. 21-year-old Moses Maldonado and 22-year-old Nicholas Samudio, both of Chicago, Illinois, are behind bars in connection to the killing of 22-year-old Thomas Villa. At 2:15 a.m. on Sunday the 25th of February, Thomas was found fatally shot in the head and chest in the 2700 block of West 18th Street. Police say he was discovered between 2 vehicles on the road. The 2 suspects were arrested later that evening at 6:23 p.m. in the 2700 block of South Holman Avenue. When officers found them, they were in possession of a car that had been stolen in January. Moses and Nicholas are charged with first-degree murder, resisting obstructing police, and theft of a vehicle. They're due for a bond hearing this week. No additional information is available at this time. An Atmore, Alabama man is behind bars after his 2-year-old son died after being left in his hot car for hours. At around 4:30 p.m. on Monday the 27th of February, 51-year-old Sean Roosevelt went to collect his son from daycare, but is told his child had not been dropped off that day. The father then discovered his unresponsive son in the backseat of his vehicle. The outdoor temperature on the day was almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Sean had spent most of the day working at his downtown ice cream shop while he forgot to drop the toddler off at the daycare in the morning. He rushed the boy to the Atmore Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Sean is charged with reckless murder, which is defined as the death of another person by acting with extreme indifference to human life and recklessly engaging in conduct which creates a grave risk of death to a person. Sean is held at the Escambia County Jail on a $500,000 bond. The investigation into the matter continues. 72-year-old Paul Stevens-Ittle of Ocala, Florida, is behind bars after investigators found printed images of child porn that weighed more than a ton. In January of 2023, detectives were alerted to child sexual abuse material being uploaded to the internet from an address in Ocala. Police said they tracked the uploads to Paul's IP address. On the 23rd of February, deputies executed a search warrant at his residence, located in the 4200 block of Southeast 46th Street. They found more than 220,000 printed photographs of child sexual abuse material, arranged in large stacks and boxes in his bedroom and office. A print on Paul's desk shows signs of heavy use. The printed items, which weighed about 2,600 pounds, a computer and digital storage device, were removed from the residence. During the raid, other residents told police that Paul would not allow them in his office or bedroom without personally escorting them. Paul was arrested and charged with 25 counts of child porn possession. He's held at the Marion County Jail, where he remains on a $250,000 bond. A Houston, Texas woman was sentenced to 40 years in prison this week in exchange for pleading guilty to killing her 2 children in 2018 and burying them under a neighbour's house. On the 28th of February, the Harris County District Attorney's Office announced that 37-year-old Shabora Latrice Thomas pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder for the death of 5-year-old Kayana Thomas and 7-year-old Araylin Thomas. On the 12th of August 2016, Shabora drowned Kayana in the bathtub at the home on the 3000 block of Tia Wester Street. After killing Kayana, Shabora made Araylin come to the bathroom, where she also drowned him. After their deaths, Shabora left their bodies in a trash can behind their house. She then left for work at Little Cajun Kitchen, Texas, and attempted to collect a $47 paycheck 2 days early, which was declined. Unable to leave town, she tried to dig a hole for the bodies, but when she couldn't dig a hole large enough, she rolled the bodies under a neighbour's house. She started packing up her house and throwing things away. She told a friend that she drowned her children and left their bodies under a neighbour's house, but the friend thought she was joking. When the friend realised it was not a joke, he asked more questions and she showed him where the bodies could be found. He then called Houston police and Shabora was arrested. District Attorney Kim Ogg said in a statement that Shabora cannot appeal her conviction or sentence due to her plea. She wrote that this mother knew what she was doing. She knew it was wrong, and we vowed to seek justice for these 2 children. Shabora's husband and kid's father was reportedly shot and killed by Harris County deputies in March of 2018. A 42-year-old Albuquerque, New Mexico man will spend the rest of his life behind bars for fatally strangling his 27-year-old fiancée and raping her after her death. On Wednesday the 1st of March, Jeremiah Lopez was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 15 years for first-degree murder, false imprisonment, and 3 counts of criminal sexual penetration, after being convicted of the charges in June of 2022. On the morning of the 15th of January 2019, Jeremiah fatally strangled Krishna Perez in their home in the 420 block of Baton Drive Southwest because he discovered risque selfies on her iPad and believed she sent them to another man. Prosecutors argued that Krishna never sent the explicit photos to anyone. After finding the photos, Jeremiah began to argue with Krishna, which led him to straddling her on the bed as she struggled to free herself before they fell onto the floor. Jeremiah then wrapped his arm around her neck for a minute or longer until she was no longer breathing. Jeremiah then ravaged her corpse and stabbed himself before calling 911 at around 7 a.m. and confessed to the strangling. He told jurors, "I'm ashamed to say it, but I had sex with her naturally, and after that went and got a knife and I slit my wrists." He added that when I didn't feel like I was going to die, I had sex with her again, and then I stabbed myself in the throat. 36-year-old Domenico Gigante is behind bars for allegedly fatally shooting his 15-year-old daughter, her mother, her grandmother, and another man who was the father of 2 young children who were also at the home. The incident occurred at around 1 a.m. on the 1st of March at 4075 Ellen Shepherd Avenue in Cocoa, Florida. A young child inside the home FaceTimed a family friend and told him about the shooting. That person stayed on the video chat with the child until he arrived at the home and called 911 at approximately 1:55 a.m. Deputies arrived at the scene and found 3 females and 1 male deceased inside the residence. The victims have been identified as 63-year-old Glenda Terrilliga, 35-year-old Constance Terrilliga, 36-year-old Michael Watson, and 15-year-old Kiara Terrilliga. 2 boys, aged 6 and 9, were also in the home at the time of the killings, and they were unharmed. The surviving children phoned a family friend, who rushed over to the home. Glenda and Kiara were both shot in their bedrooms, while Constance and Michael died next to each other on the living room floor. Detectives were able to determine that Domenico was the gunman. He had a previous relationship with Constance, and is the father of Kiara. Investigators said that Domenico left his home in Rockledge shortly after midnight and drove to the Cocoa residence about 8 miles away, where he broke into the home and shot the victims. Domenico then left the residence and returned home. Brevard County deputies went to Domenico's property and found him throwing items into the trash can. Domenico was arrested on 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. Investigators said that Domenico had been trying to reconnect with his daughter. However, his daughter had refused to have a relationship with him. Domenico allegedly told his roommate that he shot his daughter 3 times, and a few hours before the shooting, expressed his frustrations regarding his situation with his biological daughter and her family. The roommate said that Domenico told him, "I guess I'm going to go over and kill them all." Authorities have described Domenico as an extremely violent individual with an extremely violent past. Domenico has previously been arrested for domestic violence and battery in 2005, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and aggravated assault in 2012. He was also previously arrested on several counts of animal cruelty in 2008, after he killed a dog by slamming its head onto a table and breaking its neck and stabbed another dog. He's been held at the Brevard County Jail without bond. 31-year-old Richard Oswelski has recently been found guilty of beating his infant daughter to death. On the 11th of January 2020, authorities responded to Hendricks Regional Health in Danville, Indiana on a report of a 4-month-old girl who was brought into ER displaying signs of a head injury. The victim's parents told medical staff their daughter had shortness of breath and was shivering. The child had bruising on various parts of her body, including a calf and around her belly button and eyes. The child was transported to Raleigh Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, where she died a week later. The Marion County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the child died of blunt force trauma to the head and spine. The child's mother told investigators that on the 11th of January, Richard was home all day with their baby. When the mother returned home, she noticed bruising around the daughter's eyes, and she thought it looked like she'd been punched in the face. Richard told investigators that he was home alone with the baby, but he denied hurting his daughter. Richard, however, was booked into the Hendricks County Jail on the 10th of March 2021, over a year after his daughter's death. On the 1st of March, Richard was found guilty of aggravated battery resulting in bodily injury, and neglect of a dependent causing death. Richard will be sentenced on the 23rd of March. His charges come with a minimum sentence of 20 years in prison. The Selma Police Department in Alabama is investigating a homicide that happened on Thursday morning. At around 8:30 a.m. on the 2nd of March, authorities responded to a report of shots fired in the area of Division Street and Dexter Avenue. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a silver Chevrolet near the intersection with an unresponsive man in the driver's seat with gunshot wounds. Paramedics were called to the scene, however he was unable to be saved. The victim was pronounced dead at the scene by the Dallas County coroner, and he was identified as 20-year-old Quintaris Perkins, who lived nearby. Police Chief Kenta Fulford said that Quintaris appeared to have been shot while driving down Division Street before crashing into a utility pole. No further details have been released at this time, and the case remains under investigation. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania police is investigating a shooting that left a man dead on Wednesday in the city's Arlington Heights neighborhood. At about 5:45 p.m. on the 1st of March, officers responded to ShopSpotter alert for 10 rounds of gunfire at 3144 Cordell Place. When they arrived, they found an unresponsive man with multiple gunshot wounds lying on the ground in a courtyard. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office identified the victim as 35-year-old Tomont Terrell Williams Brown of Pittsburgh. Detectives recovered a gun nearby, and the city's mobile crime unit processed the scene. The motive behind the shooting is unclear, and the police have not released information on a suspect. The New York Police Department is investigating the robbery of 2 delis and the fatal shooting of a man. At around 11:30 p.m. on Friday the 3rd of March, the gunman entered the Joanna Gourmet Deli and Grocery Store at 201 East 81st Street in Manhattan, demanding cash before shooting a 67-year-old worker in the head. The suspect then fled the scene on a scooter and headed southbound on 3rd Avenue. The victim was declared dead at the scene. 30 minutes later, the suspect turned up in the Bronx and entered the Yaya Deli and Grill store at 851 Melrose Avenue. The suspect held the worker at gunpoint before taking off with an undisclosed amount of cash. Police believe both cases are connected, as the suspect was wearing a white hazmat suit and a black mask during each incident. No arrests have been made, and the investigation is ongoing. A Spring, Texas woman is behind bars after leaving her 2 children home alone. At around 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 28th of February, Harris County deputies responded to the 19,700 block of Enchanted Oats Drive on a report of a 4-year-old wandering around the streets alone. When deputies arrived, they found the child in the middle of the road crying and only wearing a t-shirt and underwear. They found the child's home, but there was no adult present. As the deputies made their way into the home, they found a 1-year-old child laying in bed with soiled linen. The child was covered in urine and laying in feces. The inside of the house was disheveled, filthy, and the children had no food. Eventually, the children's mother, 30-year-old Aisha Brown, arrived at the home and told investigators that she left her 2 children alone for about 10 minutes to run errands. She was arrested and charged with 2 counts of child abandonment with intent to return. She's held at the Harris County Jail with a bond set at $20,000. The children were taken to a local hospital for evaluation and are in Child Protective Services custody. 34-year-old Brittany Sanders of Spring, Texas is behind bars after allegedly shooting a 6-year-old boy while several middle school girls fought near her home. On the night of Thursday, the 2nd of March, Harris County deputies responded to a report of a shooting in the 6100 block of Cypress Green Drive. When deputies arrived, they learned that a 6-year-old boy had been shot in the arm and thigh and his mother brought him to a local hospital. Upon further investigation, deputies learnt that the middle school girls were fighting, and Brittany came out of her home and allegedly fired a warning shot into the air. She then reportedly fired a few shots towards the girl's car as they went back inside the vehicle. As a result, a 6-year-old boy who was inside the car was shot twice. Brittany is believed to be the mother of one of the girls involved in the fight. Brittany was arrested and booked into the Harris County Jail for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Her bond has not yet been set. The investigation into the matter continues. 25-year-old Shemai Hall's behind bars after allegedly stabbing her 5 children, killing 3 of them, and seriously injuring 2 others at their home in Italy, Texas on Friday. At around 4 p.m. on the 3rd of March, deputies responded to the residence at 328 Harris Street on reports of a stabbing. When deputies arrived, they found multiple victims, including 3 children who were dead and 2 others critically wounded. The attack occurred when a caseworker from the Texas Child Protective Services visited the home unannounced after suspecting Shemai was having unsupervised visitations with the children and decided to remove the children from the home. The caseworker called 911 and responding deputies discovered the victims. The children had previously been placed by Child Protective Services under the guardianship of another relative. A 6-year-old boy and 5-year-old twins, a boy and girl, were found dead, while a 4-year-old boy and a 13-month-old girl were seriously wounded and were airlifted to hospital. Shemai was arrested and charged with 3 counts of capital murder and is held at the Wayne McCullum Detention Center on a $6 million bond. Shemai was previously arrested for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon after being accused of stabbing her sister's boyfriend in 2017. Her twin sister, Troy Shea Hall, was previously arrested for allegedly stabbing a 7-year-old daughter to death in June of 2021. Shamilia Anderson, a relative of the victims, said the children attended the elementary school across the street from their home. They gained their wings, she said. Those were beautiful little babies. A welfare check led investigators to the discovery of a dead person and an unharmed baby at an apartment in Tampa, Florida. At around 9:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 28th of February, deputies responded to an apartment complex in the 9100 block of Avenue Club Drive to check on the well-being of a resident. When deputies arrived, they entered the apartment unit and found a deceased person. They also found an infant inside the unit who was unharmed. Hillsborough County Child Protective Services worked with the relatives of the baby to ensure the infant was placed in a safe and loving home. On the 3rd of March, the medical examiner's office ruled the death a homicide, and 52-year-old Thomas Sepp was identified as a suspect. Thomas was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder, sexual battery, serious injury, and child neglect. The connection between Thomas and the victims, or how the victim was killed, is unclear. It's also not clear how long the person was deceased for, or how long the infant was alone for. The investigation into the matter continues. Delaware State Police are investigating a homicide in the Felton area. At around 12:30 a.m. on Monday the 27th of February, troopers responded to the intersection of Hopkins Cemetery and Marshy Hope Roads on a report of a body lying in a ditch near a roadway. When troopers arrived at the scene, they found a man suffering from a gunshot wound to his upper body. The victim was taken to an area hospital, where he was pronounced dead. He was identified as 35-year-old Joshua Riley of Houston, Delaware. Upon further investigation, authorities learnt that Joshua's vehicle broke down in the area and he used a nearby resident's phone to call for help. After he returned to his vehicle, a confrontation took place with an unknown party and he was shot. No suspect information has been provided by police as the investigation into the matter continues. 37-year-old Leroy Matoy of Michigan has been charged in connection with the murder of 1-year-old Justice Starks. Authorities said that on the 29th of November, Leroy was caring for Justice and was a friend's 1-year-old daughter at a Detroit residence when he allegedly assaulted her. Medics were called to the scene and transported the baby to a local hospital, where she succumbed to her injuries on the 1st of December. She was just 1 month away from her 2nd birthday. The Wayne County Medical Examiner determined the cause of death was from multiple blunt force trauma to the head. On Saturday, the 4th of March, Leroy was arraigned on 1 count of felony murder and 1 count of first-degree child abuse. 51-year-old Mark Murphy and 49-year-old Cherie Glastonbury have been charged with the murder of 55-year-old Jeffrey McLean in Adelaide, Australia, after his dismembered body was found in a willy bin on a Salisbury South paddock in October last year. Andrew's farm man had been reported missing several weeks earlier, after he was last seen on the 18th of August. Only his torso was found in the willy bin, with police still trying to locate his head and limbs. Cherie and Jeffrey reportedly lived together and were in a relationship. Mark was believed to be known to the woman. Mark was arrested on Thursday the 2nd of March. The following day, detectives searched Cherie's house at 21 Leicester Grove in Andrews Farm and took her into custody. Police said that around 4:45 a.m. on the 24th of August, CCTV footage from an industrial premises in Salisbury South showed lights in the area and suggested that two people were carrying torches or wearing headlamps entered an area where the remains were located. The willy bin and human remains were discovered in October in a vacant lot underneath trees and vegetation in Salisbury South, about 8 miles from where Jeffrey lived. Along with the willy bin and dumped remains, police found 2 shovels, a post hole digger and a gardening fork at the site, with a number of them being in relatively new condition. Authorities said they believe the gardening tools were used by the suspects, who tried to bury Jeffrey's body in the paddock before giving up because the ground was too hard, although disturbed and dumped it in the willy bin instead. Police later confirmed the willy bin used had been stolen from a property in Eastview Street at Palmer Lodge, about 900 metres from the scene. Authorities said that Jeffrey had been subject to 4 violent attacks in the months prior to his disappearance. On the 10th of April, he was attacked with acid, and 3 days later Mark struck him in the head with a log splitter, causing serious head injuries. On the 9th of May, his car was set on fire at his home, and on the 10th of May, he had a bucket of acid thrown over him, causing serious burns to his upper back and shoulders. Along with the murder charges, Mark and Cherie faced a string of charges for assault, attempted murder, arson and trespass relating to these prior attacks. Authorities said they believe they know why Jeffrey was killed, but did not want to comment on the motive, other than to say it was not drug-related. They both remain held without bail. A 17-year-old boy is in custody in connection with a domestic-related home invasion that left 3 people dead and a 4th person wounded on Sunday night in Bolingbrook, Illinois. At around 8:15 p.m. on the 5th of March, authorities responded to a report of a possible home invasion at 123 Lee Lane. When officers arrived at the residence, they found 4 victims who had been shot. A man and 2 girls were pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities have identified 2 of the 3 people killed as 40-year-old Cartez Daniels and 17-year-old Samaya Shelton Tillman, who is said to have been in a relationship with the suspect. A 3rd victim is yet to be identified by the DuPage County Coroner's Office. A 4th victim, a 34-year-old woman, was listed in a critical condition at the hospital. 2 other juveniles, a 14-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy, were inside the residence at the time of the shooting, and both were unharmed. A woman whose name remains anonymous said her son was playing an online video game with a child inside the home at the time. He heard gunshots and got out, and then he didn't hear his friend anymore. Following the shooting, police quickly identified the suspect, who was found near his residence at around 10 p.m. and was taken into custody. The suspect, who hasn't been named, is believed to have acted alone. Formal charges have yet to be approved by the Will County State Attorney's Office. Police declined to comment on a motive. A 31-year-old woman was arrested for indecent exposure for publicly urinating at the Shami Far Park in Gainesville, Florida on Thursday morning. Officers said that while at the park, Kimberly White took off her clothes and started to urinate. She was arrested by Gainesville police for indecent exposure. A witness told officers that Kimberly urinated twice at the park. Her 2-year-old son was with her at the time. Jail records indicate that she's no longer behind bars. Austin Daniel Hoff was recently sentenced to 23 years in prison for the fatal shooting of his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend in 2016. Austin, an auto mechanic in the Austin, Texas area, persuaded his girlfriend to move in with him. She later caught Austin cheating on her, so the two broke up and she moved back to Spring. Austin began to harass and stalk her. On the night of the 5th of September 2016, Austin drove to and parked outside his ex-girlfriend's home, located at 9502 Delmellis Street, where he waited for 3 hours for her to return. At around 11:30 p.m, when Austin's ex-girlfriend came home, she was with her new boyfriend, Stephen Center. When they tried to go inside, Austin forced his way in and Stephen pushed him away. The 2 men got involved in a struggle before Austin took out a gun and shot Stephen in the chest. Austin then got into his car, removed his shirt and drove back to Austin. Austin's father called him and convinced him to drive back to Spring. When he returned, Harris County deputies located his shirt and gun inside his vehicle, which were covered in blood. On Tuesday the 28th of February, Austin was convicted of murder and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Austin will be eligible for parole after serving half of his sentence. A 30-year-old man of Mount Olive, Illinois was recently sentenced to 40 years in prison for the 2022 fatal beating of a victim in a wheelchair. At around 4 a.m. on the 7th of August, Blake Streep attacked 25-year-old Michael Ray inside a home at 2205 Miracle Avenue in Granite City, Illinois, and he suffered severe head injuries as a result. Michael was transported to a hospital in St. Louis, where he died just days later. During an interview with detectives, Blake admitted to using meth at the time of the attack, and he was angry after suspecting that Michael, who was blind and used a wheelchair, was pretending to need his wheelchair. Michael's family said that Michael became blind and needed a wheelchair after he was involved in an accident when he was a teenager and was visiting a friend the night he was beaten. They did not know Blake. On Friday the 3rd of March, Michael pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and will spend the next 4 decades behind bars without parole. Madison County State's Attorney Tom Haynes said, "This was a ruthless, unprovoked attack that was fueled by drugs and inflicted upon a victim who was nearly incapable of defending himself. The family and loved ones of Michael have experienced unimaginable suffering, but we hope that the resolution of this case allows them to have some closure." A couple are behind bars after 2 children were allegedly found tied to their beds in a home in Natchitoches, Louisiana last week. At 1:13 p.m. on Friday the 3rd of March, police responded to a call of abuse at a residence in the 900 block of Dixie Street after a concerned citizen visited the home and found 2 children tied to their beds. The citizen then freed the children and called the police. When officers arrived at the property, they arrested 28-year-old Michelle Benjamin and 39-year-old James Grant. They've been charged with 2 counts of cruelty to a juvenile, 2 counts of domestic abuse battery with child endangerment, and 2 counts of false imprisonment. Benjamin and Grant are held at the Natchitoches Parish Detention Centre. Authorities said they did not know what the relationship between the couple and the children were. The children have been placed into the care of the Department of Children and Family Services. The Hidalgo County Sheriff's Office in Texas is investigating a road rage incident that led to the fatal shooting of a young woman on Sunday morning. At around 3 a.m. on the 5th of March, San Juan police arrived at the intersection of South Veterans Boulevard and West Hall Acres Road, where they found Yoselin Rodriguez in a wrecked car, deceased with a gunshot wound. Witnesses told investigators that Yoselin was leaving a party when an argument occurred with a group of men who were driving a dark-coloured newer model lifted Dodge Ram truck. The driver of the Dodge truck pulled up next to Yoselin's vehicle, and an unknown man shot into the vehicle, striking Yoselin. Authorities do not have any suspects in custody and are continuing to investigate the matter. Police are urging anyone with information in the case to contact Crime Stoppers. A 23-year-old man is dead following a shooting early Sunday morning in Pensacola, Florida. At 1:23 a.m. on the 12th of March, officers responded to a parking lot at 2370 North Palafax Street on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived, they found a man being shot and was in a critical condition. He was transported to a local hospital, where he later died from his injuries. The victim's been identified as 23-year-old Ariel Tristan Thomas. Authorities are still investigating the circumstances surrounding the shooting. There's no known suspects at this time, and the motive for the shooting remains unclear. Authorities in Belleville, Illinois, are investigating a fatal shooting that occurred early Sunday morning. At 1:21 a.m. on the 12th of March, authorities responded to a residence at 498 South 29th Street on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived, they entered the home and found an unresponsive man with a gunshot wound. Medics tried performing life-saving measures on the man, but he is unable to be saved. A St. Clair County coroner later pronounced the man dead at 4:40 a.m. The victim was identified as 38-year-old Paul Kirby. 25 detectives from the Major Case Squad of Greater St. Louis are working on the case. No arrests have been made to date, and the motive in the shooting is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. Authorities in Dyersburg, Tennessee are looking for a 30-year-old man after allegedly held a woman captive in a locked closet for weeks. At around 1:30 p.m. on Saturday the 11th of March, authorities responded to a possible domestic complaint on Schaefer Street. Officers were informed that a man working in the area was approached by a female who reported that she'd been kidnapped weeks earlier and had just escaped. Officers arrived to find the victim hiding under a new construction home in the area. The 40-year-old victim had facial cuts and was reportedly very thin, weighing under 100 pounds. The victim said that for about 2 months, she was forced to stay in a closet that was locked by some type of locking device with a cable, and was only allowed out of the closet for an hour a day. The victim was provided with very limited food and no bathroom facilities. Officers and detectives were able to locate the vacant home on Ayres Street, where the victim was being held. Evidence found included human waste inside the residence as described by the victim. 30-year-old Brenton Bell was identified by the victim as a suspect. Brenton and the victim were in a relationship, and according to the victim, it turned physically abusive and led to her being held captive. Brenton is wanted for aggravated kidnapping, and anyone with information about his location is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. A couple are behind bars after being accused of abusing their 4-month-old infant daughter. On Friday the 10th of March, 24-year-old Devon Mims and 19-year-old Sondra Van Wy were arrested at their home in the 2000 block of Mill Street in Sandusky, Ohio. Devon is charged with felonious assault and 2 counts of child endangering, while Sondra is charged with 1 count of child endangering. On the 8th of February, authorities were called to the Firelands Regional Medical Centre after medical staff reported that a baby was admitted with suspicious injuries that appeared to be consistent with abuse. The child had 4 cracked ribs, a broken arm, a broken leg, 2 brain bleeds with blood clots due to damaged blood vessels between the skull and brain. The girl has trouble seeing, eating and suffers from seizures. Due to her injuries, the baby was transported to the Cleveland Hospital that specialises in paediatrics. Devon told an investigator that he did not know how the child got rib fractures, but admitted he was rough when tickling her. Both parents said they were unaware of their child having any falls. The investigator then told them that tickling would not produce rib fractures. While speaking with the police detective, Sondra said they brought the child to the emergency room because she started choking while being fed, stopped breathing for about 10 seconds and went limp. After becoming conscious again, the girl started crying and would not stop. The detective asked the parents if there had ever been an accident in which a girl fell. Devon reportedly admitted to accidentally dropping her while she was in the bouncer, which turned out to be a baby rocker. The girl's parents told detectives that one of them was with the child at all times, and that the girl does not go to a babysitter. The Cleveland Hospital's admitting doctor noted that the injuries constituted non-accidental trauma. This is one of the worst cases of child abuse I've seen, Sandusky Police Chief Jared Oliver said. It was pure torture for that little baby for months, said Sandusky Police Detective Carissa Cruz, who investigated the case. The girl is now in custody of the Erie County Children's Services. The couple are both held at the Erie County Jail. Devon remains held on an $80,000 bond, while Sondra is held on a $20,000 bond. "58-year-old Albert William Bethia is behind bars after being accused of beating a man to death with a broken piece of sidewalk during an altercation. The assault occurred at around 6 p.m. on the 25th of January, around the intersection of Northwest 2nd Avenue and Northwest 8th Street in Miami, Florida, when the victim, his name remains anonymous, allegedly walked past Albert and punched him in the neck at random. Witnesses told police that Albert grabbed a piece of broken concrete from a path nearby and tossed it at the victim's head, hitting him. He then allegedly picked up the concrete again and hit the victim in the head with it 4 more times. He then reportedly stomped on the victim's head with his boots. The victim suffered severe facial injuries and bleeding to his head and face. The victim was transported to the Jackson Memorial Hospital Trauma Center with a brain bleed and other wounds. Police located Albert in a park nearby where he was detained. He had blood all over his body, on the right side of his head, his pant legs and his boots. As he was being transported to the police station, he continuously struck and kicked the back of the officer's vehicle, but did not cause any damage to it. Albert was initially charged with aggravated battery and was released on bond on the 1st of March. On Sunday the 5th of March, the victim succumbed to his injuries. On Tuesday the 7th of March, Albert was rearrested after the victim died, and his charge was upgraded to second-degree murder with a weapon. He is held at the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center without bond. A 21-year-old pregnant woman from the Belmont-Cragen neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois, was fatally shot by a gang of drug dealers that she was trying to rob. Genesis Escobar had organised a heist with her boyfriend. At around 1 p.m. on Monday the 6th of March, she climbed into a car to complete a drug transaction near her home in the 5200 block of West Montana Street. Her unnamed boyfriend, who was standing outside, tried to rob those on the other end of the deal. During an exchange of gunfire, her intended victim shot her in the shoulder, back and hand. It's unclear if she was armed with any sort of weapon or how the woman came to target the car's occupants. Her killers then threw her body onto the street and dumped hundreds of dollars on top of her before speeding off. Genesis' boyfriend grabbed some of the cash and fled, leaving the gasping expectant mother on the ground. She was rushed to a nearby hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Her baby daughter, expected to be born in 2 months, was also killed in the shooting. Police are investigating the matter, and no one is in custody. On Friday the 3rd of March, 26-year-old Trey James Rudolph was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 6 years, in connection to the shaking death of an infant girl. On the morning of the 4th of August 2020, Trey, the boyfriend of the aunt of 13-week-old Jasmine Wilkes, shook the infant out of frustration at his unit in Fowler Street in Hamilton, New South Wales, Australia. He then wrapped her up, put her in a bouncer and left her to die from her catastrophic injuries. Rudolph told investigators that he was sleep deprived, had been using ice and smoking weed the night before, and was stressing out. He said, "I shook her a little bit. I gave her a cuddle and put her back down in her bouncer. I thought she was sleeping." The baby's mother, Tiani Wilkes Partridge, arrived at the premises at around 9 a.m. that morning. After she called early and Trey told her that everything was fine and that the child was asleep. And just after 10 a.m, the child's aunt checked in on Jasmine, where she discovered Jasmine was cold to touch and wasn't breathing. When paramedics arrived, she was limp and cold, and she was taken to the John Hunter Hospital, where she was pronounced dead at just before midday. The child's death was caused from head and neck injuries, and she was likely alive for about 30 minutes after the act of vigorous shaking, which could have lasted up to 10 seconds. Trey was arrested 4 months later and was charged with murdering the baby, and also faced a charge of sexual assault of a child under 10. He was set to head to trial, but the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped the charges after he pleaded guilty to the alternate charge of manslaughter. With time already served, Trey will be eligible for release in December of 2026. A 25-year-old California woman was arrested after allegedly dumping a newborn baby inside a gas station trash can and fleeing the scene. At around 3:30 p.m. on Thursday the 9th of March, authorities responded to the Chevron Extra Mile gas station at 944 West Orangethorpe Avenue in Fullerton, California, after one of the gas station employees discovered a crying baby inside a bag that had been placed in the restroom garbage can and called 911. First responders performed life-saving measures on the newborn and transported the child to a local hospital, where he remains in a critical condition. Through further investigation, detectives identified Vanessa Maldonado as the newborn's mother. At 1:45 a.m. the following morning, police served a search warrant at Vanessa's apartment in the 400 block of West Orangethorpe Avenue, roughly half a mile down the road from the gas station, and she was arrested. During an interview with detectives, Vanessa made statements indicating that the child was hers. Investigators have yet to determine whether Vanessa gave birth at the gas station. She's been charged with attempted murder and abuse of a child. California has a safely surrender baby law, which allows parents to surrender newborns at a fire or police station or other designated sites without fear of prosecution within 72 hours of the birth. 30-year-old Miroslav Mashev is charged with capital murder in the death of his 69-year-old mother Lilia Masheva. At around 10:45 a.m. on the 2nd of March, Lilia was found dead by first responders at the Royale Apartments at 9701 Stella Link Road in Houston, Texas. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences determined that Lilia died from strangulation. The killing allegedly stemmed from her refusal to give her son a 2015 Honda Civic. After the killing, Miroslav fled with the car, a wallet and a cell phone. Miroslav was later arrested on the 10th of March by Sutton County Sheriff's deputies in Sonora, Texas during a traffic stop. He's been held at Sutton County Jail and will be extradited back to Harris County. The investigation into the matter continues. A man has been arrested in connection to his toddler son's death after allegedly leaving him alone in a hot car for 5 hours. At 1:17 p.m. on Monday the 6th of March, authorities responded to reports of a 2-year-old child who had been left inside a parked car for hours along the 1700 block of Southeast Aries Lane in Port St. Lucie, Florida. The child's father, 37-year-old James Fidel, called 911 after he realised he forgot to take the child out of the vehicle that morning as the outdoor temperatures soared to 83 degrees Fahrenheit. James reportedly told police he dropped his other 4 kids off at school and came back home at 8:15 a.m. to begin work from his office there. He said he was responsible for taking the children to school because he and his girlfriend were sharing a car, as his was in the shop. It wasn't until 1:15 p.m. when James came back to collect a package from the SUV that he noticed the toddler in the third row of the vehicle, unconscious but still had his eyes open in the back seat. The child's body temperature reportedly hit 107 degrees. When first responders arrived, they performed life-saving measures on the child and transported him to a local hospital, but was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Authorities said that a search warrant verified that the rear seat reminder safety alarm would have alerted James that he left a child in the car. James admitted to authorities that he never paid attention to the warning. Investigators said that a nearby Ring camera video from a neighbour's home revealed that James showed no urgency in getting his child out of the SUV. James was arrested and charged with leaving a child unattended in a motor vehicle, causing great bodily harm, and is held at the St. Lucie County Jail. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison. A Minnesota man is behind bars for allegedly killing a convicted child predator he believed had stalked his daughter in the past. 27-year-old Levi Axtell is charged with murder and the beating death of 77-year-old Lawrence Scully at his home in Grand Marais on Wednesday the 8th of March. After the fatal attack, Levi arrived at the Cook County Sheriff's Office covered in blood and put his hands on his head and said that he murdered Lawrence with a shovel. He told deputies that he hit him 15 to 20 times with a shovel and then finished him off with a large moose antler. At around 5 p.m. that day, deputies entered Lawrence's home and found him surrounded by blood and obviously dead with major head trauma. The medical examiner noticed that Lawrence had defensive wounds to his arms. A neighbour also called 911 to report the incident after watching a van pull up at Lawrence's residence and smash a vehicle before running home. A witness also added that he heard screaming. In 1979, Lawrence was convicted of sexually assaulting a 6-year-old girl in Minnesota. He was released from prison in 1982. In 2018, Levi said that Lawrence was stalking and attempting to groom his 22-month-old daughter at the Grand Marais daycare by parking his van at the facility. Levi sought an order of protection against Lawrence, which was granted, but then dismissed several weeks later. 2 years later, Levi posted a comment on Facebook stating, "Only cure for a pedophile, a bullet." In July 2020, Lawrence was committed to a mental asylum, but was released the following year and was placed on antipsychotic drugs. Levi is held at the Cook County Jail, and his bail is set at $1 million. 44-year-old Jason Smith is behind bars after taking a naked stroll through Palm Beach, Florida. The incident occurred on Wednesday the 8th of March, when an employee from Taboo called authorities to say a new man had walked westbound past the restaurant at 221 Worth Avenue in full view of a number of customers. When police arrived, bystanders quickly pointed out the offender to officers. Jason told police he didn't know where he left his clothes and refused to give his name or date of birth. Officers took him into the police headquarters for questioning. After multiple requests, Jason eventually provided his name. However, he told police he didn't have a social security number or an identification card. He told officers that he resided on a different earth before telling them he lived in West Palm Beach. Jason was charged with indecent exposure, disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. He later entered a not guilty plea, and his bond was set at $500. Authorities believe a man may have been living with a corpse for months before taking his own life as deputies entered his home in Houston, Texas on Saturday evening. Elton Bell, the neighbor next door, made the initial call to the Harris County Sheriff's Office for a welfare check. He said he was mowing the grass beside the house and into the backyard, and he noticed a bunch of flies that were above normal size. At around 8 p.m. on the 11th of March, deputies responded to a residence located at 16827 Kilwinning Drive. When officers arrived, they also saw the flies and noticed a fetid stench emanating from the residence. prompting them to enter the home. As they made entry into the house, they heard one gunshot. They then found the body of a man in his 60s in the bedroom dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In an adjoining bedroom, they found another man in his 60s who had been dead for at least several months, and his body was severely decomposing. We're pretty shocked. It's really horrifying. I mean, this guy was 20 feet from my house lying in the room, Elton said. Linda Meadows, who lives across the street, said her daughter heard a gunshot, prompting the family to come outside to see what happened. If you ever smelled a rat in your wall, it's awful. As soon as they opened the door, you could smell it as soon as the wind blew across the street. We knew something was really wrong, she said. Neighbours said the two men were fairly private and mostly kept to themselves. Right now, the relationship between the two men is unclear, but authorities said it appears that the two were living together in the house. Harris County Forensic Science will work on determining the cause of death of the decomposed body. The identification of both men has not been released. The investigation into the matter continues. A 43-year-old Albuquerque, New Mexico man is accused of fatally beating his 45-year-old girlfriend. At around 9 a.m. on Sunday the 5th of March, authorities responded to a home in the 1900 block of Cove Road in South Valley on reports of an unresponsive woman. When deputies arrived, they found 45-year-old Michaela Novick on the floor dead with a fractured skull. It appeared a struggle had taken place in the living room, with broken glass and household items strewn across the floor. Investigators also located a single spent bullet casing near her body. Michaela's boyfriend, Jarrett Attle, had a scratch and bruising above his left eye and bruising on both of his knuckles. He reportedly told deputies that he drank with Michaela during the night, breaking 6 years of sobriety. He told deputies he went to sleep in his bedroom and woke up several times during the night, seeing Michaela in the same position on the couch. He said that he called 911 at around 8:30 a.m. when he tried to wake her up and noticed blood coming from her nose. When asked about his injuries, Jarrett said he could not recall how he got them and that he fell a lot. A medical examiner determined that a homicide had occurred and Michaela died from blunt force trauma. Deputies arrested Jarrett and he's been held without bond at the Bernalillo County Jail on a charge of open murder. The investigation into the matter continues. 40-year-old Angela West and 36-year-old Shamira Buford of Waynesville, Missouri, are behind bars and are accused of killing a 5-year-old girl. The two women were in a relationship, and the 5-year-old girl was a biological child of one of those women. At around 8 a.m. on the 7th of March, authorities were notified after a boy found his younger 5-year-old sister had choked on a sock and was laying on the floor unconscious and unresponsive at their home. Officers responded to the residence at 710 Washington Street and made contact with two women who were told that there was a deceased child in their house. Shamira said that she found the child deceased under a blanket in the living room. Officers entered the home and found the unresponsive victim with ligature marks on her wrists, ankles and neck. A blood-covered sock was found nearby, along with 3 lengths of rope. The Pulaski County coroner pronounced the girl dead at 8:50 a.m. A reporting child told police that his stepmother woke him up and he noticed that his younger sister was tied to a futon. The child said that she would steal food in the middle of the night, so Angela and Shamira would tie the child up as punishment. One of the children told police that Angela had a bad back and would ask the kids for help to tie the girl to the futon. During an interview, Shamira told officers that the child continued to steal food, and they tried numerous things to get her to stop. Angela and Shamira allegedly duct taped the child's wrists and ankles and began hog-tying the child. To keep her quiet, they reportedly placed a sock in her mouth. Angela and Shamira were arrested and charged with felony murder, first-degree involuntary manslaughter, endangering welfare and abuse of a child. They remain held at the Pulaski County Jail without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. 36-year-old Amon Mandrell Jones is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting co-worker 25-year-old Calvin Richard Lester Jr. On the morning of Tuesday the 7th of March, Calvin's unresponsive body was found in the parking lot of Fat Jr.'s Grill at 4900 Womack Road in Sanford, North Carolina. Calvin had a single gunshot wound and was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives began searching for an unknown man in connection to the shooting. He was driving a dark four-door Toyota Camry with front-end damage. Authorities identified the suspect as Amon, and he was taken into custody later that day. Investigators said that Amon and Calvin worked together at manufacturing business Caterpillar, which is in walking distance of the diner about a quarter of a mile down the road. The shooting occurred after the two men got off work. Fat Junior's was closed at the time. A motive in the shooting is unclear. Armin is charged with murder, and he's held at Lee County Jail without bail. 18-year-old John Kenichi of Bennington, Vermont, faces aggravated assault charges after allegedly breaking his 1-year-old daughter's collarbone. On Wednesday, the 8th of March, the child was brought to the hospital. He told different stories to doctors and police about how his daughter got hurt. John's father also alleged that his son was lying about the injury and said that John had been abusive towards the baby on several instances in the past. John later admitted to Vermont State Police troopers that his daughter was crying incessantly on his lap. He said the child's mother left the room. He squeezed her inward from both sides of her body and heard a pop sound, causing a broken clavicle. John admitted that his anger took control of him, but called the injury accidental. He pleaded not guilty in the Bennington court on Thursday and was released on conditions that he stays at his father's house, not see his child or the child's mother, and cannot be with any other children under 16 without adult supervision. If John is found guilty of aggravated assault, he faces up to 15 years behind bars. A gunman in Germany has fatally shot 7 people at a Jehovah's Witness worship hall in Hamburg before turning the gun on himself. The incident occurred at 9 p.m. on Thursday the 9th of March. 8 other people were wounded, including a 7 months pregnant woman who lost her unborn daughter. The deceased adult victims were 4 dead men and 2 women aged between 33 and 60. The gunman's been identified as Philip Fuzz. The 35-year-old, a German citizen and former Jehovah's Witness, began shooting through a window at the hall, where dozens of people were gathered before entering. Members of a special forces unit arrived 4 minutes after the shooting began and stormed the hall and chased Philip. He ran up a flight of stairs and fatally shot himself. Authorities said that Philip left the Jehovah's Witness community voluntarily about a year and a half ago on bad terms. Philip had a permit as a marksman since December of 2022. The Hamburg shooter was known to police, who had visited his apartment prior to the attack in response to an anonymous letter received in January, raising concerns about his state of mind. Also indicated that he had directed his anger towards the Jehovah's Witnesses, but Philip persuaded officials not to take his semi-automatic pistol away, which he legally owned. During the visit, authorities noticed the weapon was left out and asked Philip to properly secure the weapon before leaving. Authorities in Canton, Ohio are investigating a shooting that left a man dead on Friday. At 10:44 a.m. on the 10th of March, police responded to the intersection of Navarre Road Southwest and Greenfield Avenue Southwest and reported gunfire. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a red Ford Taurus with heavy damage to the front left side, with the engine still running. Inside the car, they found 55-year-old Stephen Troyer unresponsive in the driver's seat with multiple gunshot wounds. Paramedics rushed him to the Altman Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 11:13 a.m. The motive in the shooting is unclear, and no arrests have been made to date, as the investigation into the matter continues. A Texas stalker broke into a Redmond, Washington home early Friday morning and fatally shot 33-year-old Zorae Zadegi and her husband 35-year-old Mohammed Nazeri before turning the gun on himself. At around 1:45 a.m. on the 10th of March, the 38-year-old trucker, identified as Ramin Kader Karam Razari, climbed through the window of the couple's home, located in the 16,700 block of Northeast 89th Street. He then shot Zorae Mohammed. The woman's mother, who was also in the house, managed to escape and ran to the neighbour's place to call 911. When police arrived at around 2 a.m, they found Mohammed unresponsive, lying on the front lawn with a gunshot wound to his chest. They attempted CPR, but he was later pronounced dead at the scene. When officers entered the residence, they found Ramin and Zorae dead inside. Redmond Police spokeswoman Jill Green said that Ramin died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound after he'd been stalking Zorae for many months. Ramin reportedly listened to Zorae's tech podcasts and began communicating with her, and they struck up a kind of friendship and talk, she said. Ramin was divorced with 1 child, and the two met in person in 2022. Zorae hid some of the interactions from her husband. Ramin reportedly showed up at the couple's home uninvited, delivered flowers, and even promised to send a musical band to play outside. He would park down the street, or stay in local motels near the property in hopes of catching a glimpse of her. Ramin began to just send a lot of messages to the point that Zorae decided to disengage. as Ray filed a no-contact order last month. In it, she stated that Romain had bursts of anger and is completely delusional, and these delusions make me fear for my life and the lives of my loved ones. She also said that police could not serve the trucker with a no-contact order because we weren't able to make contact with him in Texas. It's just unfortunate that the stalking ended in such a tragic way, she said.
Footage of a murder suspect escaping from a courthouse has just been released. The defendant, 28-year-old Eddie Villalobos Jr., appeared in the Washington County Courthouse in Hillsboro, Oregon, for jury selection at 11 a.m. on the 28th of February, after allegedly stabbing two men, killing one of them who was his mother's partner 2 years ago. Security camera footage released to the public by the Washington County Sheriff's Office on Thursday shows Eddie in the courtroom guarded by two officers, and he's wearing a blue shirt and dark trousers. One of the officers removes Eddie's handcuffs and leg shackles, in line with legal requirements for court session. Eddie then scoots behind two desk chairs and runs out of the courtroom door with no one blocking the path to the door. The footage then shows Eddie racing down multiple hallways and through doors as two officers chase him and bystanders get out of their way. After he managed to get away and officers began searching for him, Eddie was found hours later hiding in a closet with a blanket over his head in a vacant apartment he broke into. His trial's been rescheduled for September. He faces additional charges of first-degree burglary and second-degree escape. Sergeant Danny Pietro, a spokesman for the Washington County Sheriff's Office, said his agency is reviewing the incident and will use training to address the lessons learnt. The two officers who are guarding Eddie remain on regular duty. "60-year-old Rodolfo Pazamaya is accused of fatally shooting 43-year-old Dante Dwayne Welch in Oak Grove, Kentucky on Sunday morning. At around 11:20 a.m. on the 5th of March, Dante and his toddler were sitting in the vehicle, parked in the driveway of his home at 227 New Gritton Avenue, when an altercation broke out. A witness reported seeing neighbour Rodolfo fatally shoot Dante. It's unclear what started the fight. Police arrested Rodolfo at his home, where officers located the suspected murder weapon. The following morning, Rodolfo was arraigned in court on charges of murder and wanton endangerment. He pleaded not guilty to the charges and is held at the Christian County Jail on a $500,000 bond. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for the 13th of March. 32-year-old Sean Sanderson is in custody hours after being accused of fatally stabbing his brother and injuring his mother inside a suburban home in Melbourne, Australia on Wednesday morning. Sean's 65-year-old mother was stabbed in her neck and was rushed to the Royal Melbourne Hospital in a serious but stable condition. Her 29-year-old son was also stabbed and ran across the street to a private hospital to try and get help, but succumbed to his injuries outside. And just after 8 a.m. on the 8th of March, authorities responded to Willoughby Street in Reservoir on reports of the stabbing and identified Sean as a suspect. Initially, a team of heavily armed police surrounded the residence and tried to negotiate with Sean through a megaphone to come outside. 2 hours later, after storming the premises, they realised he was not home, and an extensive search began for him. At 2:40 p.m, officers located Sean on the corner of Murray Street and St. George's Road in Preston, and he was arrested. He was barefoot, had a gash to his cheek, and was found with a wad of cash on him. He was taken to the Heidelberg police station for questioning, where he faces multiple charges including murder. The investigation into the matter continues. Police are investigating the fatal shooting of a woman in Indianapolis, Indiana early Monday morning. At around 2 a.m. on the 6th of March, home surveillance video recording captured a truck turning off South Arlington Avenue and onto Oak Avenue in the Irvington neighbourhood, followed by a single gunshot. Moments later, a man began yelling for help and neighbours called 911. When the police arrived at the scene, they found an unresponsive woman lying in the middle of the street with a gunshot wound. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The Marin County Coroner's Office identified the victim as 36-year-old Dorothy Brinker. Police determined that the man who was at the scene was a person of interest, and he was taken into custody for questioning. Police said that the man and Dorothy knew each other, but would not state what their relationship was. Witnesses claimed the violence was domestic related. The investigation into the matter continues. 58-year-old Jerome Booth is behind bars after allegedly shooting two men on Sunday morning. At around 3 a.m. on the 5th of March,
Authorities responded to a gas station on the intersection of West Washington Street and Holt Road in Indianapolis, Indiana, on a report of a man shot. When officers arrived, the victim told police that he ran to the gas station for help after being shot in the neck by his father-in-law Jerome, following a dispute involving the victim's wife. The wounded man was conscious and alert, and medics transported him to a local hospital. Police tracked Jerome down to a home a block away, along Rockville Road, where they found a second victim, 39-year-old William Hoskins Jr. dead in the trunk of an SUV. Willie was a friend of the wounded victim. Police located the suspected murder weapon behind the home in some bushes. Jerome was arrested for murder, but refused to explain why the shooting took place. He's been held without bond.